Life is very simple.
Be driven by love, not fear.
You are infinitely good. Desire to rape and kill, and
Oh no.
nothing is stopping you.
Oh no. Judge the horrible acts that other people do.
Because you're going to be guilty over this.
Don't feel guilty. Slam your door. You're being a dick to your door. Stop it. Okay, we've got a challenging one today. We're going to be learning about goodness. And we're going to be learning it from the worst possible person to be teaching us about goodness. He's going to be trying to help us see non-duality. It's a tricky thing. We have these sort of categories of things that are good and things that are bad. And presumably, you need something good in order to distinguish it from something that's bad, or you need something bad in order to distinguish it from good. So you need good and bad together. You need the yin for the yang. He doesn't want to teach us about good as opposed to bad. He wants to teach us about, it's going to be good, bad. It's like the thing together. It's not yin or yang. It's not yin as opposed to yang. It's actually yin yang together. I think he's going to just assault us with things that are traditionally seen as bad, and he's going to call it good. This is what I think is going to happen. Big trigger warning right now. He's going to be saying a bunch of stuff that sounds bad, and he's going to be saying that they're good, and it's going to sound ridiculous because it is ridiculous, and it's going to make either him look crazy or the audience feel crazy because they don't understand what he's talking about. What he's trying to do is get us to a higher resolution, a lower resolution, I don't know, a different resolution, to not see good as opposed to bad, but to see that whole system together. I think he's gonna be pretty bad in the not best possible way, but good luck to us. Leo has had many epiphany experiences, and the way he articulates his ideas are designed to create that epiphany feeling for his viewers. Unfortunately, like he said, he sounds crazy. Yeah, he doesn't want to hold your hands through it, and he has a point, because it is bad when people understand it intellectually and they think they get it, but they don't get it, and that's tough, and he wants to get around that by just getting you to it. But oh boy. All right, we're doing it. It's happening right now. You've been warned. Good happens, good. If bad happens, good. A translation of the Tao Te Ching. Oh no.
You know, it's funny. It's funny that no one in your life has ever taught you what goodness is.
Oh no.
Isn't that amazing?
It is.
None of your teachers, none of your professors, all your fancy degrees and bachelor's degrees and master's degrees and PhDs and all these experts and all your physics and all the scientists, and still no one can give you a simple explanation for what goodness is. Well, here it is.
Simple. Isn't it simple?
You've come to the right place.
Okay, we're here. We're doing it.
Even in many spiritual teachings, I notice that they don't really talk about goodness.
True.
They don't explain what it is.
Okay.
And I think that's because many of these teachers simply aren't directly conscious of absolute good. They may be awakened in various kinds of ways, but they're not deeply conscious of the absolute good that is a facet of the ultimate awakening.
Okay.
Which is why I think that a lot of times it's not talked about in many spiritual traditions, like in non-duality teachings of certain kinds, in neo-Advaita teachings, in Advaita teachings of certain kinds, it's not talked about. Of course, in other teachings it is talked about, so it varies.
Okay, so first thing, he's saying it absolute good, so he's gonna be using that phrase, which I think is good, to say absolute good as opposed to like what, relative good maybe. They all don't get it. I don't know. He might be kind of he kind of thinks of himself as special. He might think of himself as special. It seems like that sometimes, that he understands more than literally everybody else. I don't know. Let's be aware of that. He might be the most awakened person in the world. He might be a little bit off base. I don't know.
But good...
People emphasize different things in their teachings, so that's fine.
That's not merely just a human thing. It's not just a human quality, and it's not just a human invention, and it's not purely a relative thing. Even though, of course, mostly when people talk about good and bad, they're talking about relative good and bad.
Yep.
They're talking about the duality of good and bad.
Yep.
This is not what I mean when I say goodness. When I say goodness, I'm talking about goodness with a capital G. Okay. Absolute good.
Okay. Like it.
That exists. And you can become directly conscious of what that is. This is not a belief. This is not an ideology. This is not a speculation. This is not a philosophy. This is something you can become directly conscious of.
I love this. He caveats a lot of his videos by saying this. It's not a belief, not an ideology, not a speculation, he said. Not a philosophy, none of that stuff. This is true. Really, he's giving us conclusions, and we should not believe those conclusions. Those conclusions should be inspiration for us to investigate for ourselves. And it's a good reminder. Every time we study, like generally for every, like I like that he points that out for us. A lot of times we can get caught up studying a lot and not taking any time to practice. But every moment of study should be preceded and followed by a moment of practice. Really. It really should be.
And I'll just share the conclusions of my own conscious realizations with you in the hope of inspiring you to pursue these realizations for yourself so that one day you can have these realizations of goodness for yourself. And then that could possibly improve your life. And you could use some of the things I talk about now already to start improving your life, even prior to having had a direct realization of absolute goodness.
Has he been watching my videos?
It's a little tricky because most of us are operating under the materialistic paradigm, sort of the scientific paradigm. And under this paradigm, we just assume that reality is neutral, right? Like atoms aren't good or bad. They're just neutral.
They are.
Right?
Yes.
And good is it's sort of like an unscientific concept, you might say. Like if I try to tell a scientist that the ultimate nature of reality is absolute goodness, the scientist will say, no, that's just some hippie nonsense. That just sounds good to you, Leo. That's like some wishful thinking, bro. Like you've been smoking too much weed or something.
There we go.
But I mean, this is not some sort of tangible, quantifiable, formalizable thing like some equation. So there's that kind of bias there.
That's that huge bias. All right, I'm drinking some pu'er tea. And he's so correct here. We get this idea, I mean, it's true, right? Reality is neutral. If we're talking about scientific reality, physics, material reality, in that sense, yes, it is neutral. That is not the only reality. That is not the only way, that's not the only lens to evaluate our reality. You can evaluate it with different ways. He's going to be presenting to us another way of seeing the world. And it might sound like a redefinition of the word reality. So again, be careful of this. Sometimes people actually just completely redefine the word as reality. Like they say their experience is reality and scientific is not real, it's not true. Okay, yes. We have to understand what they mean when they say that. Like, they might sound crazy if they say that, and they also might make other people feel crazy if they say that science isn't real. That's a problem. That's a problem. Science is real. It's just a different type of reality than your experiential reality. So we're going to be exploring your experiential reality, a different lens of how to see the world. Not quite as neutral as the physicists let it out to be. And it's important to recognize that neither one of these realities should overshadow the other. Neither one dismisses the other. Neither one is more real than the other. They're just different ways of looking at the world. So let's see.
But notice, again, this is one of those metaphysical, tricky, sneaky metaphysical assumptions, hidden assumptions of science, is that reality must be neutral. And that if you think that reality is good, somehow you must be crazy. And then as the objection goes, well, Leo, if reality can be absolutely good, then what about absolute evil? Shouldn't it also be absolutely evil to balance it out?
Nope.
Well, it turns out not to be the case.
Nope.
And I'll explain why in a minute.
Easy.
And and even under some Buddhist conceptions of reality and Advaitin conceptions of reality, there's also sort of this assumption that consciousness must just be neutral, not good.
Yep.
Well, there is such a thing as absolute goodness. I've become directly conscious of it for myself. You can as well. There's nothing particularly special about me in this regard.
Okay.
So what you can become directly conscious of is that physical reality is the material realization of absolute good. Physical reality, all of it, the physical universe as you know it, is the very embodiment of absolute good. It's not neutral. It's absolute good. Why? You might wonder. How can this possibly be the case?
Crazy.
Sounds kind of crazy.
It does.
Sounds kind of loony.
Wow.
Why would reality be good and not neutral? Well, consider that all of the stuff that you consider bad is actually
I appreciate
just
that.
a consequence of the way that you judge reality. I mean, that's literally what bad is. It's a judgment that you project onto reality. Can you see that?
I can see that. Can you guys see that? Also, it's important. He said something about the Buddhist worldview, or Buddhist and Advaita and other sort of, I don't know if he mentioned Hindu traditions or whatever, but there are different ways of seeing the world. So I do want to just give a very quick shout out breakdown of a particular way of seeing some Buddhist traditions. So we've got 3 worldviews. We've got the ethical worldview, you've got the Vipassana worldview, and you've got the shamatha worldview. So with ethics, everything's connected, everything's one, everything affects everything else. That's sort of it. Vipassana, everything in your experience is real. That's kind of it. Everything in your experience is real. Everything is important that you experience is important. That's the only thing that's real. That's the only thing that exists. That's the only thing that it's only here right now. That's it. And in the shamatha worldview, it's pretty much what he's explaining right now. Everything is love. Everything is infinite bliss. Everything is goodness. Everything. And this is like absolutely no exceptions. Every single thing in the world is good, blissful. And it's trivially easy to get to like understand, to feel this in a very low way, in a very like low level perspective. You can just feel that everything is perfect. And I guess you can get even farther with it, and you can deepen that practice a whole lot more, and get really blissed out on every experience, everything in the world, and see everything as God speaking to you in its loving embrace. You can get ridiculous with it, But this is one of the different ways of seeing the world. You have everything being connected. That's one way. You have only your experience exist and they matter. That's one way. And you have everything is love. That's a different way. And that's what we're getting to.
A lot of people can't see this.
Your judgments, man. Judgments are bad.
They think that bad is somehow baked into the physical structure of reality. As though like theft is actually bad, or murder is actually bad, or genocide is actually bad. But if you're truly unbiased in the way that you look at reality, you can kind of step back from the situation. You can see that actually it's not bad. The badness that is there is something I'm projecting into it because it's bad for me. It's bad from my point of view. It's bad because I have various sorts of attachments to how life should unfold. I believe there shouldn't be theft. I believe there shouldn't be rape. I believe there shouldn't be murder. And of course, why do I believe these things? Not because they're absolutely bad. I believe these things because all these things are threatening to my own survival. Pretty obvious, right? But then you might wonder, here's where it gets...
Yep. Again, trigger warning. This is... He's trying to show us, okay? He's not going to explain it very well. He's going to explain it in this really terrible way, and he's just going to say, this thing you think it's bad, it's good. It's good. Yeah, it's a different worldview. There's a different worldview of like literally feeling goodness and love radiating from everything, from every experience that you have in every single situation that you see. You can change your worldview to do this. It's probably better if you understand what you're doing and want to do that, and you can do it in small scale and start to deepen it and understand. He's not going a very a nice route with this. What he's trying to do is make an epiphany moment in your mind, I guess. This is one of our theories here. He's just going to kind of assault us almost, like really, with traditionally bad situations and say, it's good, it's good, it's good. Not the best way of going about it. Really, really, actually kind of a bad way of doing it. I mean, it's a little misguided at best, maybe. Gaslighting at worst. So, yeah, if it makes you... What's a good way of doing it? I think a better way would just be explaining in that way that I'm explaining it, and maybe giving some smaller situations and giving people a taste of that feeling of like bliss and love everywhere, and just say, hey, you can just deepen that. You can just deepen that. And it'll be like obvious, like, okay, any situation can be radiating love, even the bad ones, the ones that I traditionally think of as bad. It's a different worldview. And you can train yourself in that worldview. You don't have to adopt that worldview. It's not the only worldview. It's not the best worldview. It's a way to reduce your suffering. Because if you see everything as good, and it literally feels like love or goodness, then you're not going to be suffering at all. So that's a good thing. But you don't have to adopt this worldview. You can. You can. It's an option. You don't have to. The way that he frames it, it makes it seem like this is the world. This is the way that reality is. It is not. It is a way that you can see reality. If you choose to, if you want to deepen your bliss or whatever, if you want to see the world this way, this is one way of doing it. And it's very, very helpful to do that because it makes you less, it doesn't trip you up. Like in any situation, you'll feel good, you'll feel pleasant, and you'll be ready to address anything in the appropriate way. So, not the best way of doing it, but we're going to watch it and we'll see. Hopefully it doesn't get too terrible, but trigger warning for everybody.
Kind of tricky because you might then think, okay, well, Leo, if that's true, then shouldn't goodness just also work in the same way? That goodness is just also a projection of the human mind. Mm-hmm. And it's also just, from a certain point of view, like maybe you think that, I don't know what, sex is good, children are good, pleasure is good, food is good, the kind that you like. I mean, whatever you think is good.
I love that he doesn't have like a set of traditionally seen as good things already. Like he didn't have that prepared. He's got a set of all the traditionally bad things. He's got that ready to go and call those good, but he doesn't have a set of traditionally good things to call those good. How ridiculous. Okay.
Being nice to people, you might say, is good. Charity is good. Giving donations to the hungry is good. Uh-huh. These sorts of things. And you might say, well, Leo, isn't that all a projection of, again, this sort of biased mind? And you're right, it is. Those are projections. Because you're selecting certain things to be good relative to other things which are not good. So, giving donations to children you think is good, whereas abusing children you think is bad.
Oh, no.
So here we're dealing with good as a lowercase g, good.
Mm-hmm.
Relative good.
As opposed
and this
to
is a
bad.
projection of the human mind.
Good as opposed to
bad. But then what people don't realize is that there is absolute good. Mm-hmm. Absolute good transcends and includes both of the relative good and bad. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, what happens is that your consciousness expands and becomes so holistic and so integrated that you gain enough meta-awareness to realize that, yes, the bad stuff is just a projection of a biased mind for survival purposes. Yes, the lowercase g good stuff is also a projection of the selfish, biased mind for survival purposes, because usually what the ego calls lowercase g good is simply that which serves the ego. So you're clear about that, but then what happens is that you break through to a meta-consciousness of the entire dynamic as a whole, all of reality as a whole, and you see that from that ultimate absolute point of view, it's all absolute good. Good with a uppercase G. And here you realize
Hey, thanks for following.
that good is not just some human thing. Good is a deep existential facet of ultimate truth, of what consciousness is. Consciousness is goodness. And consciousness is all that there is, as we've talked about many times before. We've talked about how reality is one. We've talked about how it's infinity. Infinity can only be one. And the nature of consciousness.
That's a good take. Yeah, definitely. Because if you take psychedelics, you're just thrown into these different worldviews. So that's a really good way of putting it. He takes, drugs, LSD, DMT, mushrooms, all that sort of stuff. And it does like completely shift your worldview. And it's just like, you're just presented with this new worldview. Your entire normal traditional worldview is gone. And you have this new worldview, which might include this sort of everything's connected, everything is love, whatever. Only your experience exists, whatever. And if that's how he found it, he thinks that's the most appropriate way for other people to also find that realization. I like that. It's a very good take. Yeah. So let's remember here, we're dealing with yin and yang. This is sort of the relative level, yin and yang, but he wants you to see yin yang together, yin yang. And you interact with yin yang differently than you interact with yin or with yang. So another way is like you have life and you have death, but then you have like life, the cycle of life, which is life and death. And you interact, you see the cycle of life differently than you see like a particular being that's alive and a particular being that's dead. So he wants you to stop seeing good with the lowercase g is how he's putting it, and bad with the lowercase b, and he wants you to see absolute good bad is one way I would put it, make it more clear, but he's calling it absolute good. That's what he wants you to see. And if you see absolute good, which is pretty much any situation, he's calling it just consciousness, anything, you feel it in such a different way. It's hard to describe how you feel it, but it feels pleasant.
Consciousness is good.
He wants you to feel that.
And everything else is just a subset of that. Mm-hmm. Everything else serves the ultimate good. So why would reality itself and consciousness itself be the ultimate good? Think about it.
Okay.
If you had unlimited power to create any kind of reality that you could create, of all the possible ones that you could create, what kind would you create that would be the highest good out of all the possible ones? Mm-hmm. The answer is you would give an infinite number of beings the opportunity to experience and discover the infinite goodness of consciousness for themselves. That would be the ultimate good, is if you created a reality like that. And here we are. We are in that reality.
Okay. Interesting.
Now you say, but Leo, isn't that circular? So you're saying that the ultimate good is to create a reality for other beings, of which there's an infinite number of different ones, to realize the goodness of reality? That's very tautological. That's like a recursive definition of goodness, because you're using goodness within the definition of goodness. Yes, exactly. That's not a bug, that's a feature. You see, because since reality is a singularity, an infinite singularity, since it is one, there is only one reality and can only ever be one reality, that one reality has to be at the ultimate absolute level, has to be its own source and its own end, its own goal and its own point. So what is the point of reality, you might say? Well, the point of reality is, of course, just itself. And what is the point of goodness? The point of goodness is itself. Goodness
Blooper 106 just
the
subscribed.
one thing that is its own reward.
You're helping the stream stay alive.
You don't
Thank you very
do
much.
good things to get something else. You do other things to reach the good. Mm-hmm. Like money by itself is not good, because you can use money for all sorts of bad stuff.
True.
But goodness is good in and of itself. That's the special property of goodness that allows it to hold this absolute position amongst everything else. So imagine, if you will, an entire universe in which nothing but good existed. Why wouldn't God create such a universe if God had infinite power? Well, of course, that's exactly what God would do. Now,
So we have to. He's using a lot of. He's introducing a lot of concepts that won't make a lot of sense if you're not too familiar with the space, infinite power, God, and all this stuff. It's complicated to describe really what he means, but he means that I'm not even going to try to describe it. God being you in your own consciousness, and consciousness is the same that everybody has at all times. It's really weird. So he doesn't. It's strange to me that he's evoking the concepts of God and creating the universe, where he recognizes that that's not. He's using this analogy to appeal to people who have a particular view of what God is and what even creation means, but that is not what he means when he uses the word God and what he uses creation. It's not at all related. So even if you follow the analogy, it doesn't quite work properly, exactly well. But it might be helpful for some people to understand a little bit. Maybe. I don't know.
you wonder, well,
Possibly.
why didn't God do that? But of course God did. Here we are. Ta-da.
We did it.
This is it. You're sitting inside of it. You
Infinite
are
goodness.
it. This is absolute good. What this means is it's not possible for there to be a universe that's any better than the one that exists. This is the ultimate one.
And let's remember again, so I do think this is actually, it's extremely trivially easy to feel the goodness of the world at any point in time. It is very difficult maybe to sustain that, to get out of the habit pattern of, we have a normal habit pattern of choosing like this is good, this is bad, this is desirable, this is not desirable, and so on and so forth. But it is extremely easy to just feel this absolute goodness that he's referring to. And if you get into the habit of doing that more often, you can have that as your baseline, and you can deepen that in many ways. So throughout this, maybe try to do that for as short a period as is possible. Feel the absolute goodness of the entire universe. It's just very, I don't know, think of anything pleasant and have that sort of feeling, and that'll be kind of close-ish to it. But then you want to let go of the actual particular thing that you are getting the pleasant feelings from, because you don't need anything to get pleasant feelings from it. The fact of awareness, the fact of being alive, the fact of consciousness is enough. Trivially easy to get to, hard to sustain. Try it.
The difficulty, though, here is that you do not have sufficient consciousness to understand infinite goodness. Your definition of infinite goodness is corrupted by your lack of consciousness and by your selfishness and all of your biases and judgments. You see, that's the problem. You think that God made a mistake in the design of the universe because here you are in the universe, this finite creature, moving around, walking around, doing stuff, and stuff doesn't go your way. But that's only because you're so self-centered and you're expecting a good universe to be that which satisfies all of your selfish needs. But of course, if the universe was structured like that, that wouldn't be a good universe, that would be an evil universe. Because it would suit you, but it wouldn't suit all the other infinite creatures and beings in the universe. See? That would be a selfish universe.
Interesting.
Instead, what we actually have is we have a completely selfless universe. A selfless universe is one which is not biased towards any one individual being or creature. It's completely neutral in that it treats all beings and creatures equally in a certain sense. It doesn't privilege anyone. It doesn't put anyone on a pedestal above any other one. Even though, of course, certain creatures have more abilities than other creatures. That, of course, that's obvious. But that doesn't mean that, like, for example, a human is better than a donkey just because the human can do calculus and a donkey can't. Mm-hmm. No, they're both equally good as far as the universe is concerned.
True.
The universe is treating everyone like a perfect judge would in a courtroom. You know,
it's so important too. Like this idea, a lot of people have this idea that evolution wants us to be smarter or more intelligent or something. You know, we've evolved and we're somehow at some like good state. You know, this is a common thing that people think of. Humanity has gotten far, and if we survive for long enough, if biology survives for sufficiently long enough time, we'll get to even more intelligent species. This is ridiculous. Everything that exists right now exists just as much as you exist, just as much as humanity exists. It's all exactly persisting here right now. And that is the only measure. How do we define what is good? How do we define what is the most fit, I suppose, if we go straight to biology and evolution, survival of the fittest? The way that we determine that is if it exists currently. If it's alive here right now, if there's a system that's here, it is surviving, it is fit. And that means that everything that exists is equally fit. Not that one is more fit. Not that intelligence is somehow a better tool for existence. Everything that exists currently equally exists. This is important because we don't want to corrupt our scientific worldview, which is neutral. Like, everything is equal. Everything that just exists now is here, and that's it. We don't want to corrupt our scientific worldview with our own human sort of bias, thinking that intelligence is more important because we can get more stuff for our own selfish needs using our intelligence. I mean, that's cute. I mean, it's great. It's actually really good. I like it a lot. But in terms of a scientific worldview, it's super neutral. Everything that exists now is just as much as evolved as you are. Nothing is better in that sense. And that's an important thing that needs to be pointed out very often.
He had the perfect judge in the perfect courtroom. He would treat both defendant and the plaintiff equally without any kind of bias or prejudice. And that's exactly what God does with all of his creatures. But in so doing, you see the problem from an individual creature's point of view, which is where you're sitting there looking at this thing from an individual creature's point of view, from an individual human point of view, a lot of times it doesn't seem fair what the judge is doing. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that because you're so selfish, you will project your own selfishness and bias and judgments onto the judge, and you will think that the judge is making some sort of error in his judgments because he's not siding with you, because you want the judge to side with you, because you're selfish. And of course, if the judge did side with you for some sort of biased, partial reason that wasn't part of the truth, then that would be a bad judge. That would be an evil judge. That would be a corrupt judge. Mm-hmm. But that's precisely what you want. See, you don't really want a good judge when you go into a courtroom. What you really want is you want a judge who's corrupt in your favor, who will favor you, who's partial towards your side. Because you don't care about the truth, you care about winning. And you care about winning because you care about survival. So from your point of view, it seems like the universe has a lot of bad stuff in it. Actually, it doesn't. The universe is absolutely good. But you need to have enough perspective and meta-awareness and distance in order to be able to see that. You can't see that from your little egoic, self-centered perspective.
I see.
One of the most profound realizations you can have in your life, in this work that we're doing, is to realize that only good can exist. Nothing else can exist. In fact, existence is goodness. They're synonymous. They're identical.
I agree with this a lot. This is a very, like, it's profound. Like, you can shift your worldview, but again, the way that he's framing it makes it seem like it is the case that that is true. This is one perspective that you can adopt and you can deepen. This is one view of reality that you can take if you like. It's not necessarily true. But try it. It's fun.
There's nothing bad that's ever happened in the entire universe. It's all only good. If you have infinite consciousness to see all the goodness. If your consciousness is less than infinite, you won't be able to see and appreciate all of the goodness because infinite goodness requires infinite consciousness because actually they're the same thing. They're identical. Any consciousness which is less than infinite is going to be partial and is not going to be infinitely good. Non-goodness is literally impossible for the universe other than as a illusion or as a misperception of the universe. So anytime you look into the universe and you see something that you don't like and you think it isn't good, really you think that that's because God made a mistake in the construction of the universe. Actually, it's you who's making the mistake in perceiving that part of the universe. You don't see how that part fits into all the other parts and adds up to absolute goodness. See?
I see.
Because your perspective is always finite, it's missing how all the finite pieces interconnect into infinite goodness.
Don't let him gaslight you, boys. All right? He's being very one-sided here. He wants to also point out, he's not doing it, but he might do it. Anytime you see good also is the same problem. If you see something as good, as distinguished, as different from something bad, if you see something that you like or you crave, if you see something that is desirable, you see something that you hold as more important than anything else, that is the same problem. It's also just as getting away from that perspective, from the different perspective of seeing good, bad together, absolute good as he's calling it, good with a capital G. If you see lowercase g good, you're missing the absolute good. If you see lowercase b bad, you're also missing the absolute. So it's not only in the negative valence. If you see something bad, then it's bad. If you see anything that's good in the traditional way, it's also getting away from the ultimate goodness.
So to see the absolute good requires infinite perception. You need to literally be able to see how every piece fits together and serves the larger whole. Mm-hmm. If you're looking at individual local areas of the universe, then yeah, it'll seem like you're seeing bad stuff. But really all that bad stuff, if you zoom out far enough, you will see how it plays into the ultimate goodness of everything. Now you might wonder, well, Leo, what about evil? Well, there is no evil, of course. That's the beauty of this.
Of course.
When you realize absolute goodness, you automatically solve the problem of evil. Evil is just a problem of perception.
True.
So this age-old philosophical problem that philosophers and theologians and even scientists have, debated and wonder about for thousands of years, like how could God allow for evil to exist, or why does the universe contain so much evil within it? And the answer is just so simple. Stop projecting the evil onto the universe, and you will stop seeing it. It's as though you're looking at the universe through a cracked set of glasses, mm-hmm. and you're wondering why everything looks so cracked. It's your glasses. It's not
true.
The universe itself that's cracked.
It's the lens that you have. So he's referring to good with no opposite, absolute good. It's important to note that you can also just trivially call it absolute evil or absolute badness or whatever. You don't have to. The way that you determine what life and death together are called, we call it life. Generally, the circle of life. We could also just call it the circle of death. It wouldn't make a difference. It's just a term, just a word. Who cares? So you could call this good, bad, relative bad, and together that forms absolute evil. You could call it that. But that thing has no opposite. That's what he's getting at. There's no distinguishing that from anything else, because that is everything. There's no distinguishing. Yeah, that's fine. It's kind of weird because we don't have there's no like formal, there's no like normal way of doing that. Life, death, life. But then you have like emptiness and form. This is sort of a Buddhist thing. And both of those together is called emptiness. I mean, you could just as easily call them both form, or just call them both empty form or something like that. You don't have to get too weird. So again, this is like yin, yang, together they're yin, yang. Or maybe you have a coin, heads, tails. The whole thing is called a coin. Generally, a lot of people say heads, tails, and we're just going to call the whole coin heads. It's kind of weird to do that. But you could just easily call the whole coin tails if you want it. Or you could just call it something different so there's less confusion. Maybe that's even better. English doesn't have non-dual terms because it's not a part of the Western modern worldview. True. Yeah, we don't have a system for seeing non-duality or even understanding the concept. There's a lot of philosophy. It's always distinguishing more, discerning more, not much uniting. So there's going to be lots of duality baked into the way that we speak. And whenever we get to these more meta concepts or more aggregated concepts, it's hard to, or even non-conceptual concepts, it's hard to speak about them. Yeah, we don't have a language for it, unfortunately. Not yet.
So here's God's existential dilemma. You see, God itself is infinite goodness. That's literally what God is. Mm-hmm. God's greatest wish for you, because it's infinitely good, is for you to realize that you are infinitely good, and that everything is you, and that everything is infinitely good. Mm-hmm. But here's the problem. If God forces upon you goodness, then you actually won't be able to realize goodness. You're going to recoil in horror. You might wonder, like, well, Leo, why didn't God just create a universe in which every human was just automatically perfectly good? Mm-hmm. Why would God create imperfect humans? And the reason is precisely because God is good. Because God is good, God must allow you the freedom to choose whether you want to be good or not. Because goodness cannot be coerced. Goodness has to be chosen, consciously chosen. If it wasn't, then it wouldn't be good.
He's jumping through a lot of hoops right now. I don't know what he's muddying a lot of different normal world, like typical worldviews with this worldview of everything is good. Like, why would it matter if you're forced or not forced to see goodness? That's more, we're going back into the relative perspective. So I'm a little confused by that. I don't know if he's trying to be helpful to help us understand, facilitate our understanding and translating it partially into a normal Western worldview, or if he has muddied these different worldviews together in his own mind. But I mean, all those hoops he's jumping through is just kind of weird, right? Doesn't this seem a little strange? Seems a little weird to me. I don't know.
You see,
I don't know about that one, Leo.
That's the trick with goodness. You might think you can force goodness onto somebody else, but actually you can't. Because the very essence, the very heart of being good is that it's uncoerced.
Yeah, definitely. The non-duality, which is like there's like a non-duality which is separate from duality. No separation, which is separate from the separation. And then there's the no separation, which integrates all of them. Yeah. This seems like he's saying it's hard to parse, right? We do want to have language for that. Like, this is the penultimate reality, the penultimate non-duality, which is like everything united, separated from everything not united. But then there's a even bigger unity, which is everything united and separated. Whatever, who cares? And he seems to be sort of muddying a little bit, confusingly a little bit. I'm not sure. Yeah, but that's a good good thing you're noticing there. There's a huge difference between the way that people refer to non-duality, and sometimes they try to force you into this no distinctions of anything, and that's not quite non-duality. In a more ultimate, you can go slightly more ultimate, and then now you have distinctions and no distinctions together, and they're both totally acceptable and allowed. But you get into these weird areas where there's some people who are dogmatically opposed to any sort of distinctions. They're dogmatically opposed to any sort of they want to force you to be essentially blind to anything. It's really strange. Yeah.
It's unmandated.
It's good though.
You shouldn't be good. See, a lot of times religious people and moralistic people, they have this huge mental hang-up in that they say, Leo, but what's stopping me from being evil? What's stopping me from raping people and killing people and thieving and pillaging and genociding and doing all this sort of stuff? What's stopping me from doing that if there are no rules, no objective rules
definitely
in the universe? If God is not going to punish me for thieving and killing, then why shouldn't I do it? And of course, the answer is so obvious. The answer is that nothing is stopping you.
Oh no. I'm also I'm concerned that there are a lot of people who have this objection. Would you, anybody out there who wants to go out and murder and kill people and do horrible things, traditionally seen as horrible things? I don't get the urge. I don't understand that. So maybe I'm privileged in not having that sort of urge to do things that are traditionally seen as bad or things that are typically seen as antisocial. But I don't understand. Why do we need rules to stop us against it? I mean, to me, it actually just feels bad, generally. Feeling bad kind of sucks. Not that it's bad in some ultimate sense, but it just kind of sucks, right? So don't do that, maybe? I don't know.
If you are at the level of consciousness such that you desire to rape and kill and thieve and do violence onto others and to harm others, if that's your level of consciousness, then you see, if God was to force you to be good, if God created rules and punishments that required you to be good, then you wouldn't really be good. You would just be pretending to be good under threat of punishment, in the same way that in a dictatorship, if a journalist is told that he must write some sort of puff piece about the dictator, praising the dictator in the newspaper, under threat of his family being tortured, of course he's going to write that puff piece. Now, does that make it true? Is this puff piece about the dictator true? No, of course not. He's just writing it because he has to, because he's coerced into it, because of course he wants his family to not get tortured. So obviously he's going to do that. It doesn't make it true. Mm-hmm. Well, likewise, see, what you want is you sort of want God to do the same thing to you. It's like you want God to be this dictator and to dictate goodness to you. But if God did that, then it wouldn't be really true goodness. You would be acting out of fear, and you wouldn't be consciously selecting goodness. You would only be selecting it because you want to avoid some punishment. But that's not goodness. You see, that's evil. That's selfishness. When you're acting out of fear and you're acting out of self-preservation, you're being selfish. You're not being good. To be good, you have to be selfless. And so the very odd and mysterious thing about goodness is that it turns out that actually you can't truly be good unless you choose to be good without any coercion, for no reason whatsoever, for no other reason than simply because you like being good. See,
Everything is goodness, except if you're being coerced into doing it. The Advaita tribe seems to be enlightenment that's not integrated and isolates themselves with it. Yeah, you certainly don't tell your mom she doesn't exist. Yeah, not a good idea. Yeah, I like to see it again. I like to see it in the three trainings. This is sort of a Buddhist sort of thing, but you've got ethics, you've got vipassana, and you've got shamatha. And we're talking about shamatha things. So if you like accelerate in shamatha and you immediately see that everything is love, and you've never practiced ethics, well, you're going to be kind of a dick, and you're not going to see things clearly, but you're going to be feeling great all the time. And that's good from a perspective. That's fantastic. But you're going to be tripped up a lot, and hopefully, yeah, I don't know. You might get into a lot of arguments trying to tell everybody that everything's goodness, and that's weird. But then you might get into a different perspective where you improve your vipassana very, very highly, and you don't care about your ethics, and you don't care about shamatha. So you walk around and you say things like you don't exist, like the person speaking doesn't exist, I don't exist, and my mom doesn't exist. You guys are just sensations. You guys are just feelings, which is kind of ridiculous, right? And then they probably won't even be feeling pleasant. Right? They have no self, they have no center, so there's no center of the suffering, which is good, but there's no, it doesn't feel good. It feels good in a way. It doesn't feel bad. It's hard to describe no self, right? But there's no center for any of the suffering, so there's no suffering. There's no like ethical training, so you're not doing anything traditionally seen as good, and you don't feel any pleasantness of the world, so you're not going to be like radiating any joy or happiness or anything like that. So it's going to be like this weird thing where you just like kind of seem delusional, telling people that they're seeing the world incorrectly. Everything is just, sensations. Yoga, each path walked alone, argue and bicker with the others. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to, if you develop that one training and then you bicker it, and it's difficult. But then you can also do the other thing where I guess ethical training isn't so bad, right? If you only do ethical training, no, that can be bad too, because you can get dogmatic, right? So if you only do ethical training, then you start doing things like forcing others, like trying to force other people to be vegetarian, or that's just kind of a meme example, but forcing other people to never listen to music, something ridiculous like that, which is a big part of ethics in this sort of space. Like, don't listen to music, don't get involved with politics and all that stuff, because it's affecting you. It changes how you feel, and that's really bad. So don't do that. And if you get really, really strong with ethics, you're going to be you're going to try to force other people to never eat meat because, the suffering of other beings is bad for you. You're going to be trying to force people to never watch media or play video games even, right? Because even the imaginary people suffering in the video games is bad for you. Like, this is actually you can directly experience this and feel this. But you don't want to force other people to do that. Because they're all just sensations. If you train your vipassana, then you recognize they're all sensations. And if you train your shamatha, then you recognize that everything is love anyway. So, and you have them all equally trained, then you can be living well in the world in a traditional sense. You can be helpful in helping other people skillfully develop these similar trainings, developing these similar worldviews as you. You'll see that anytime you experience any suffering, it's not really you. It's not personal. It's not happening to you. And it's sort of dispersed. And there's no actual substance to it, and then you can feel love all the time, and it's great. You want all the three trainings developed somewhat simultaneously, and they all work together. Of course, if you train ethically, it makes it very easy to see the world clearly. If you see the world clearly in vipassana, it makes it very easy to figure out what helps you get into the shamatha states, jhanas and all that stuff, to feel good, to feel infinite bliss and love and all that stuff. And when you feel that, when you get that absorption, that concentration, it makes it super, super hyper aware so that you can do your vipassana really, really well and get to the depths and super hyper precise with every bit of your experience. And then once you do that, you can do even more with your ethics. And they all work together. It's fantastic how that works. But if you only train it one at a time, or if you only train in one and you're like super talented, I guess, accidentally, and the others aren't developed, you get into some weird issues. The relative is an illusion. Yeah. You still practice the two accumulations, virtue and wisdom, absolutely. You realize that the absolute, there's nothing to be meditated on, yet you still practice meditation. Yep. You see the relative and absolute as one, yet you diligently practice. Peerless teacher at your feet, I bow. Huh. Patrul, I don't know this. Oh, Rinpoche. This is a Tibetan teacher. This seems to hold a similar realization, but more integrated. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. You want to realize that, nothing matters. It's all love, shamatha stuff. But that should not conflict with your ethical worldview, that everything is connected and you need to stop the suffering of others to stop your own suffering. And you need to stop your own suffering to stop the suffering of others. And that should not change your Vipassana worldview, which is they don't exist and you don't exist. It's all just sensations. They shouldn't interact with each other and cloud each other. They're just different worldviews. Yet they support each other. It's weird.
It's only when the joy of being good overpowers every other drive and desire and craving and priority that you have, only then will you truly be good. If there's any higher priority in your life than pure goodness for its own sake, then you're not good. You're actually evil. Ta-da. You see?
I see.
What you truly have to realize here is that goodness is its own end. And this is absolutely crucial because God has to be its own end, because God is one. There's nothing outside of God. See, it can't have some sort of other purpose. It can't have an ulterior motive. Its motive has to be itself. And what it is pure goodness, or just the pure joy of existence itself, the pure joy of consciousness itself, unclouded and uncorrupted by any kind of self-biases, any kind of needs for anything else. Just purely, directly existence, purely, directly consciousness, purely, directly truth, purely, directly goodness. And so, of course, it must be self-justifying, self-reinforcing, and completely tautological. This is such a profound tautology that literally, if you become conscious of this, you realize that nothing but goodness can ever exist. And that is the very structure of reality and the very structure of God. And precisely because that is its structure, that is what goodness is. Goodness is such a structure that nothing other than it can exist. That's what it means to say that it's absolute. It's completely all-encompassing. And that's just the nature of infinity. There can't be an infinity without goodness because they're identical. And of course, there can't be anything outside of infinity, and there can't be anything prior to infinity because infinity occupies every possible domain and every possible dimension, every possible possibility, and every possible space and place that anything could be. So here's sort of the genius of God, is that God's consciousness is so pure and so uncorrupted by any kind of biases. It's so perfectly neutral that it sees the beauty of every possible form that could exist, and it welcomes all of it, it accepts all of it, embraces all of it, and loves all of it because it sees that all of that is itself. That's what it is. It's everything. It's everything that could possibly be. It's the sum total of everything that could possibly be. So the mistake that the ego mind makes here is it says like this, it thinks like this. Well, it sort of imagines that God is this being sitting up in a cloud, and then when God is creating the universe, God is thinking to itself, well, should we have monkeys or rhinoceroses? It's like, well, the monkeys, they're kind of smelly and ugly, so we won't have too many of them. Instead, we'll have rhinoceroses. And then it says, well, should we have humans or not? It's like, well, yeah, humans, okay, we'll have humans, but we'll only have these kinds of humans, but not those kinds of humans. Mm-hmm. And then, so you think that God is this creator that's sitting there and he's very picky and choosy about how it's creating stuff. But of course, this is a silly, childish, egotistical notion of God. Actually, God is not a person. God is completely impersonal. It's the universe.
Whatever your vision of God is not silly or childish or egotistical. Don't let him be mean to you, all right? Leo's a big meanie all the time. Don't be tricked by that. He's a cool guy, so that's not monkeys are not brown. Are they? I don't know. Don't let him be mean to you, okay? You can have your view of what God is, and that's totally acceptable and totally fine and great. He's referring to something different. He's just using a fancy word. Don't be tricked by thinking that what he says is God must be what God is. No? Nope. He's talking about something very specific. The entire universe, your consciousness, whatever, he defined it. And he's just giving it a name, which sounds sort of powerful, I guess, from his cultural traditioning, right? That's, oh yeah, lemons are not yellow, true. Yeah. Yes, monkeys are not brown. Yeah, how do you define the color of something? So yeah, watch out for that sort of thing, especially in these. I mean, all these spiritual guys, they do this very often, where they redefine a word in such a way that's sort of foreign to the way that we think of it in the modern West. Or maybe they're not redefining it; they're just sort of using more Eastern traditional definitions of some particular lineage. Maybe, I don't know, but that does not need to override whatever definitions you have. It's just a different concept. It might use same words. It's just something different. Your view of God is totally acceptable, totally great. Obviously, nobody thinks that God is choosing. Well, maybe people do. I don't know, but don't let that upset you too much. He's being a little inflammatory intentionally, I think, but don't be tricked by it. What he means by God is not what you mean by God, probably.
It's the field of infinite consciousness that gives rise to everything that we're sitting in right now, communicating through.
That's God.
So,
in his language.
But see, in a sense, God is so neutral and so unbiased that it allows everything within it to arise without any kind of judgment or rejection of it. It embraces all of that, and that is the ultimate good, such that whatever arises is the good. So really, the problem of evil here is overcome not in the way that people conventionally think of removing all the evil stuff from existence, but rather by embracing all the quote-unquote evil stuff, embracing it with such depth and metaphysical profundity. You embrace it so totally that literally it ceases to be evil anymore.
Now that you mention it.
Because what you realize is that anything that was evil was not actually objectively evil. It was only evil in your inability and lack of consciousness to comprehend its role in the larger totality. And when you comprehend its role, you understand it, and also you fully embrace it with consciousness and love, it literally ceases to be evil. And then you realize it never was evil. It was simply your own biases and selfishness which prevented you from realizing that that evil was actually good.
Beautiful. I gotta say, this is not as bad as I thought it would be. Traditionally bad, in the mundane sense, relative sense. I thought it was gonna go harder on the traditionally seen as bad things. Maybe he's growing a little bit. I'm not sure. Anyway, we've still got a bit more. It could still get worse. knows? Are you guys moving around a little bit? Okay, we don't want to be stuck sitting in one position. Remember, you gotta move. You got a body to take care of. Just move around, get hydrated, all that stuff. It's important for your health, and good health is good. Good health is a very good expression of the absolute good. You know, the typical, obvious expression of the absolute good is a good expression of the absolute good. You want to use those typical, normal expressions of the absolute good and use that as a catalyst, maybe a pointer, I don't know. You want to use that as your main expression of the absolute good. You don't want to get too stuck in the negative expressions of the absolute good, the traditionally seen as bad things. So you don't want to neglect your health. You don't want to neglect your body. You don't want to neglect your mind. All these things that sometimes we get caught up into. You know, modern world here. I know. It's common. But let's try to overcome those sort of things. Be healthy and happy as the better expression of the absolute good. Let's try it. All right, we're continuing.
That's the ultimate mindfuck that people don't appreciate about
Destiny was dope.
good versus
Had a
evil.
lot of fun.
Evil is not an objective problem. Evil is a problem of perception.
And Antico's pizza.
It's a problem of consciousness. And since reality is nothing but consciousness, that's it. That solves the whole problem. Now here, people make the mistake of thinking like, well, Leo, so does that mean that when I become very, very conscious, then rape will no longer happen, and robbery will no longer happen, and war will no longer happen, and genocide will no longer happen? No, I'm not saying that. All of those things will happen. War will continue to happen for thousands more years. The thing that will change is not the war. What will change is your understanding and perception of the war. The war will get so recontextualized that you will see and understand and accept the war as being part of the larger whole, of which is just a part of you yourself, because war is just a part of what you are, because you are the whole universe. So anything in the universe is just a part of you. So you see that and you recognize it and you embrace it and you accept it. And then, even though people could still be killing each other with rockets and guns and so on, you're gonna see the larger context. So war will get recontextualized for you. Likewise with rape, theft, and murder, and any other evil that you can imagine. Now, of course, understandably, a lot of people don't like this idea. This is very threatening to them. And that's because they lack the consciousness, they lack the development, they lack the open-mindedness, they lack the non-judgment, and they literally do not have the ability. They're not strong enough. Their mind is not strong enough to accept all of themselves.
Yeah, I thought he was being good, but now he's disparaging people for not seeing the goodness in, forests. He said all the things, right? He said it already. I don't have to say it. He said it. And he's disparaging people for not seeing the goodness. He's saying you're not developed enough. You're not conscious enough. As if you must be conscious in this particular way. It's ridiculous, okay? It's ridiculous. Don't let him fool you. This is one way of being conscious, and it's a great way of being conscious. It is not the only way of being conscious. You don't need to do this, okay? You don't need to do this. And if you aren't doing it, it doesn't mean you're not developed enough as if you must. It's a different, it's like you didn't learn how to play piano. That's fine. You don't need to learn how to play piano. You're not developed enough. Anyway, you get the picture, all right? He's being a meanie face. Don't be tricked by it.
Their mind is busy rejecting certain aspects of reality, and that's because they're not concerned about truth. They're concerned about their own personal survival. They've confused their own self-preservation for the ultimate good. You see? So to realize the ultimate good, this requires that you sacrifice yourself a little bit. Mm-hmm. And most people aren't interested in sacrificing themselves. They don't like that. They have a lot of preconceived ideas. They've developed enemies. They've made enemies out of people, out of different ethnic groups, out of different cultures, out of different organizations, of different political parties. They've made enemies out of these different things, different facets of reality. And so now, good luck trying to get them to admit that actually all those enemies and all that bad stuff that you were fighting against your whole life, that all that stuff was actually absolute good.
Admit.
How do you convince a person of that?
Admit.
Especially when they've been personally deeply wounded or injured by some group of people or some individual or some ideology. Like, for example, if your parents were killed in Vietnam by the communist regime there, today you might be living in America as a sort of a Vietnamese American, but you know your family history, and you know how like someone in your family was killed by these horrible communists. And so now you feel that these communists are evil and that communism as a whole is an evil ideology. And of course, why do you feel that way? Because it personally hurt you. And the deeper it hurt you, the harder it will be for me to try to convince you that actually communism is part of absolute good. Now, communism here, I'm not picking on communism per se. I'm not trying to convince you of the validity of communism here. I'm just, I could use an example with capitalism the same way. I mean, a lot of people these days hold capitalism as evil. Many progressives and socialists and liberals and dynamic stage green folks, they see capitalism as the greatest evil. And why do they see it that way? Well, because they were hurt by it in some way, ultimately. That's ultimately what it all goes back to. The stuff that you consider evil is simply that stuff which hurt you in some way, hurt your ego, hurt your survival. So maybe you're a progressive today, but you went to school and you got a bunch of student loan debt and now you're stuck in wage slavery, and this naturally upsets you. And there are these elite people, these capitalists who have a lot of money, these billionaires, whereas you're working some dead-end job for years and years just to pay off your student loan debts, and you don't have a lot of prospects in your life, and you feel that the system is rigged against you. And in a sense, you're right. I mean, structurally speaking, the system is rigged against you. But nevertheless, I mean, it's still all absolute good. But you can't see it that way because you're not careful enough about your self-biases. See, when I talk about self-biases, you don't take that whole notion seriously enough. You think I'm just toying around. But I'm not toying around. Because self-bias is at the very heart of the whole problem of trying to understand reality and straightening yourself out about the nature of reality, see? As long as you don't take self-bias seriously, you're going to be deeply self-biased, and you're going to be projecting your self-biases all over the place, and you're not going to be able to see reality clearly. The reason I obsess about self-bias so much is because my top concern is to see reality clearly. And obviously, the only way you can see reality clearly is if you eliminate every single self-bias you have.
This is a tough one, not specifically with self-bias, but I mean, including self-bias. When there's so many things that are being said, all these different spiritual teachers will say, or whatever, vaguely spiritual people on the internet, they say things that are very important and like super foundational for a different type of worldview. And it's really hard to take it seriously. It's hard to like just adopt something so foreign. For this example, for noticing your self-bias and trying to get away from it or trying to at least account for it in some ways, that's very hard to do. And it doesn't matter how much you obsess over it. It doesn't matter how much you disparage people for not understanding it in the way that you understand it. It doesn't matter how much you curse or swear about it or how many hours of video you make about it. Most people aren't going to get it. And that's like a tricky thing to do. Like, how do you help facilitate this understanding in the way that he understands or the way that you understand something? And how do you help somebody understand that when you say something, you mean it very, very seriously? It's so difficult. And I don't know, that's just a tricky one. That's a tough one to get past. I'm not sure how to help facilitate that. I think a more gentle way would be preferable, but that's just my own style. I like more gentle things, and of course he likes more. He seems to be more harsh about it. So I'm not sure. It seems to be probability of this kind of spiritual teaching may have to do with the desire for instant results. Oh yeah, definitely, quick and easy. Yeah. You're skeptical of the benefit of the big wow right now when it's given center stage. Yeah, there's a lot of that sort of, take some drugs and you immediately get this new worldview and you never really integrate it. You never really get anything from it. You can immediately just like, wow, boom, I got it. But then you don't really got it. I also like the more gentle, gradual sort of progression. But that's my personal style here. I don't know.
Including your preference for being alive. See, that's your biggest self-bias right there.
Tough one. How do we he talks about this sort of stuff, like survival is like, when you're working with this different framework, survival is not important. Survival just doesn't matter. In fact, your biology might not even be a thing that exists in this different framework. If you're working with like Vipassana, like you don't have a body oftentimes. You don't have a brain ever. Like you never experience your brain. So like they don't matter. When you're dealing with this sort of shamatha or like your love of the entire universe, like, you being alive doesn't matter. None of that matters. So it's hard to like jump to the different framework. I don't know how you express how important it is to like literally just let go of every single part of your worldview that you have right now and adopt something new temporarily. You want to adopt it temporarily, see how it works, see if there's less suffering, see if there's a different, see if it more resonates with you, I guess. There's a different way of seeing the world. And then you can go back. You can always go back to your initial worldview. Try on different clothes, like, apparently. Something like that. Try on different worldviews. But it's hard to really sell that point. And I don't know how to get over that. But, he's trying right now. He's telling us that it's very important to see this. Your self-bias needs to go. Needs to be addressed.
If I put a gun to your head and threaten to pull the trigger, you're going to have a very strong self-bias for that trigger not to be pulled. Mm-hmm. And you might say, well, what's the problem with that? Well, the problem with that is that dynamic, that self-bias runs your entire life mm-hmm. and distorts your entire perception of reality. Mm-hmm. And from that, all your other problems materialize. See?
Yep.
So the reason that so few people understand absolute good, the reason your teachers and professors and parents and your clergy and whatever, your preacher and your imam, the reason they didn't teach you about absolute good is because how could they? They were too self-biased to ever realize absolute good. So they can't teach it to you. Mm-hmm. And of course, they're all going to deny that what I'm saying here is true.
Of course.
Because their self-biases require them to deny it. Mm-hmm. Even to just admit that what I'm saying here is true is already deeply, deeply threatening to any self-biased person because they're going to have to admit how selfish they are.
We want to be careful here.
How selfish they've been.
We want to be very, very careful here. He's saying true as if it's true. It's not true. You can hold it as truth, maybe. I mean, I don't know what the right language for this is. It's not true in that it's like truth. A lot of Leo likes to say that he's looking for absolute truth or something like that. I don't quite. He's looking for truth. And he's saying that this is the worldview. This is it. It is not it. The scientific worldview is truth if you're looking through a scientific lens. This worldview is truth if you're looking through this lens. And to have that sort of authoritarian stuckness of saying that my truth is the truth, that's a big source of a lot of problems. And I'm not saying that there's relative truths. That's a whole different perspective. But I'm saying that there's a different lens that you can have, and the word truth is just referring to different things. The word truth can refer to some sort of external scientific consensus, empirical reality, or it can apply to specifically your internal experiences at the moment, or it can apply to infinite love of the universe. They're just different usages of the word. Him saying that this is the truth and other people can't see it and they want to fight about it is a part of the problem. Him thinking that there's a hierarchy and he's found out what the truth is. Let's not try not to get caught in that too much, because that's not the case.
So it's your very selfishness which prohibits you from seeing this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So God is infinite good because God is infinitely selfless. So in a sense, we could say that the universe is totally neutral in the way that science and materialism tend to hold it.
Mm-hmm.
The universe is totally neutral, but what these scientists and materialists don't fully realize is that it's not enough just to say that. You have to actually realize what ultimate neutrality means. Ultimate neutrality is not just like, oh, well, yeah, it's just neutral. No. Ultimate neutrality leads to absolute good. So the two are not really in conflict with each other. It's just that for the scientist, the idea of neutrality is just an idea. For the mystic, for the awakened one, for the sage, the idea of neutrality is actually absolute good. And it's utterly mind-blowing, profound, and amazing when you have this realization of good. It really feels like good. It doesn't feel neutral. It feels really good. It feels like infinite good. It feels so good, it's like drowning in goodness.
Can confirm.
It feels like you're dying in the goodness. That's how good it is.
I can confirm this I'm not at all like a great meditator. I've never done any psychedelics. I've not done any drugs other than tea. I drink a lot of tea. Hey, this is a tea stream. I drink a lot of tea, and that feels really good. But I can confirm everything that he's saying from a very, very basic meditation. This is like, I'm saying it's trivially easy. I think it's extremely trivially easy to get into, to feel this sort of infinite goodness of the world. And I'm so low level here. Extremely low level. Not at all anything that he's experienced or any other great meditator or teacher of the subject. And it is mind-blowingly amazing. And this is, again, one of those things where, like, he's being very, very sincere when he's saying this. He's not joking about how good it feels. And this is like neutrality here. There's like, everything is perfect. Not that there's no hierarchy. That it feels amazing. He's not joking. This is very important. He's being sincere. He's being serious. Highly recommend it. Please try it. Please.
It's scary good.
Yeah.
It's infinitely good. It's absolutely good. Now you might wonder, have you ever thought about this? If God exists, what stops God from being evil? Think about it. What stops God from being evil? Those of you who think that there need to be fixed objective moral rules or shoulds, like you shouldn't murder, you shouldn't steal, you shouldn't pillage, whatever. For those of you who believe in these sorts of rules, well, but so are you saying that God is bound by these rules too? Is there a rule that says that God should be good? But if there is, where did this rule come from? Because God is the creator of everything. So if God created everything, then God must have created this rule. So God created this rule for himself. So why didn't God create some other rule?
You don't think it's trivially easy for everyone?
He said, if he created this rule, he could have created a different rule.
No, it's trivially easy. It's trivially easy for everyone, but the caveat I didn't point out in this instance. You can do it trivially easy for a very short period of time, and you will immediately go back into your normal habits. And it might be hard to notice, but it's easy to do. Like, you can get to this, like, everything is blissful and infinitely great, but it'll be very short-lived because you immediately go back to your normal habits, your habit pattern of judging things and seeing differences and distinctions in the world. And it might even be, like, difficult to remember because it's such a short period of time. If you keep doing that, even for the short periods of time, you can get better at noticing it and then get better at sustaining it. And you can also get better at sustaining it and then deepening it. That's just, I guess, maybe that's just a unfounded claim here. I think it's trivially easy to do it in very short bursts and also not very deep. I've done pretty okay at making it partially habitual. You know, I can prime myself and I can get into that sort of mindset pretty well. It's a practice, I guess, a lot about it. And I can sustain it for, some vague period of time, and I can remember it well, but it's not very deep. It's hard for me to get it, farther into the depths of it. But even the trivially easy part of it is it's so good. It's so good. It's so good. But that's my experience. Yeah, I think, I don't know, maybe it's extremely difficult to even get to that. But that's just my claim that it's trivially easy to get like short bursts, maybe hard to remember, maybe hard to notice, but short bursts, like a microsecond. And it can be completely erased immediately by your habit patterns coming back. And I think that that's trivially easy, and you want to keep doing that so you can grow it. But this is just an unfounded claim. It's my own thought here.
So you see the problem here? Mm-hmm. Since God is the highest authority, there can't be a higher authority above God, because any higher authority above God would itself be God. So God can't have any rules placed upon it. God has to be infinite and unlimited. But that being the case, you wonder, why can't God be evil? And the reason God isn't evil is not because it has to not be evil, but simply because it's totally selfless, and so it chooses good. Why? For no reason whatsoever. There's not a reason for God to choose to be good other than goodness itself. Mm-hmm. God is good because if you were infinitely conscious and infinitely intelligent, you would choose to be good. There would be absolutely nothing for you to gain in being evil. You see, the only reason anyone has ever, in the history of mankind, ever committed a single evil action, a single selfish action, is because there was something that they were going to gain from it.
True.
Whether it was some money or some sex or some power or some prestige or some celebrity, some fame, some big house, a fancy car, whatever.
You want to get away from why, you want to get away from if, when, because. All of that is the killer of this goodness that he's referring to. Why, if, because, reasons at all. That needs to go out the window. There's absolutely no reason at all. It just is good. No when, no if, no because, none of that. Just good. Just good.
All of this is done because you think you're going to gain something by getting some material thing. But since God is infinite and God is the entire universe, God has literally nothing to gain from being selfish because it already owns the entire universe, so there's nothing for it to gain. Therefore, it can't be evil. It has no motivation to be evil. Pretty cool. The logic of this is very interesting. There's a very delicious, exquisite, divine logic to God. You can spend a lot of time running through these sort of logical loops in your mind, thinking about love and goodness and infinity and oneness and consciousness and how it all interconnects in a very perfectly logical way. It's very satisfying to contemplate that. Now, what about morality? Let's talk about morality for a little bit.
Okay.
A lot of people are confused about morality. What is morality, and why do people get morality so wrong? So actually, the human mind and ego has different stages of moral development that it goes through, from very low levels, crude levels, unconscious levels, to the highest levels, which is basically what I've been talking about here. So at the lower levels of morality, morality is basically based on punishment and reward. Mm-hmm. For example, little children to behave in moral ways, to follow rules, and to be nice to others, not to bite their friends and their siblings. This is sort of the early origins of morality in children. How do you get children to obey these rules? It's simply through brute physical reward and punishment. If a child is biting his sister, you maybe smack him over the head if he's biting her to get him to stop. And you smack him hard enough and he'll stop. Why? Because the pain and suffering of the smack on his head is going to be worse than the joy he gets from biting her. And then over time, he'll learn to stop biting her. And then, as he matures and grows up and develops a little bit more, then he internalizes those rules and he develops a little bit more autonomy. Now he doesn't need to be literally physically punished. He can just be kind of threatened. And he can be threatened with not even physical violence or pain, but oftentimes just with a sort of a look of disapproval.
Yep.
Or just because he knows that, his friends will see him in a bad light. Like, you're in school. Why don't you just take a dump in the middle of the classroom? Even though you might want to, because, it takes more energy to go to the bathroom. It would be easier just to take a dump on the desk, on the teacher's desk. Why don't you do that?
What?
Well, because there's going to be so much disapproval. Peer pressure comes in here. There's going to be so much disapproval and humiliation and embarrassment from all your friends and colleagues and teachers who will look at you and think of you as a monster, basically. And you don't want to be thought of as a monster. That doesn't sit well with you. Mm-hmm. So you learn not to do that.
Suspiciously.
And so that's sort of the next stage of morality, is where your morality is not based on physical punishments and rewards, but it's based more on how well you're going to fit in with your peer group. Mm-hmm. And this is a lot of what morality is for many people who are at spiral dynamic stage bluish. A lot of religious fundamentalist type people. For them, morality boils down to basically just being good conformists to their society or community, and not sticking their neck out of the herd too far for fear of it being chopped off. So it's that kind of conformist morality. Then, and this morality is usually based on rigid black and white rules of do this, don't do that. This is the 10 Commandments idea. And these sorts of people tend to really believe in this idea that there's an objective, absolute right and wrong in the universe. And of course, for these people, it's very sad because these are the most religious people. And they're so passionate about God and so forth, but actually they're completely incapable of understanding what true goodness is. They're completely incapable of understanding God. Precisely because they're not actually contemplating the nature of existence for themselves, they're just following rules.
Remember, his worldview is not better than any other worldview. They're different. When he's saying that you cannot contemplate, he makes it seem like there's a value judgment, it's a hierarchy of things that are better. No, they're all acceptable. Other people have different ways of seeing the world. Let them be. Let them do their thing. It's just different.
And
don't let them be mean to you. Okay?
Following rules doesn't lead you to absolute good. It actually has the opposite effect, which is why these religious people, religious fundamentalists, are some of the most violent and evil people that have ever existed. They love to do genocide, and they love to subscribe to nationalism. They love to have a superiority complex about their culture, their religion, their worldview, their ethnicity. They love to judge, even though the Bible tells them not to judge. But they do it anyways because they can't help themselves. Because true morality is a function of consciousness. You can't really fake true morality. Your consciousness determines it. Your level of moral and cognitive development determines it. If you're not able to grasp the relativity of reality, there's no way that you can truly be moral. because you're going to be stuck in your own perspective, in your own biased worldview, in your own selfishness. And you're not going to acknowledge the validity of all the other worldviews and perspectives that are out there, all the other religions, all the other political parties, all the other ideologies, all that stuff, right? You're going to think that yours is the best.
Okay. Is he criticizing himself?
So
I can't tell.
the next level of morality comes when your morality is based on principles, more so than hard and fast rules that you read in a book that you take literally.
Okay.
So here, the principles become more like, treat others the way you want to be treated. That might be a principle, the golden rule. There might be other principles of truthfulness and honesty and compassion and whatever else. And these are principles that you're not just following a prescribed, rigid set of formulas, but rather you're intelligently trying to apply these principles in various kinds of messy situations. Within moral philosophy, there's a whole slew of these sort of edge case examples where there's these little thought experiments where you say something like, well, if there's some sort of we caught a terrorist and he has the codes to a nuclear weapon that's going to explode in 10 minutes. What do you do with this terrorist? Can you torture him? Is that moral? Or would it be, or do we have to just let him, we don't torture him? That would be the more moral move. But then, 1 million people will die when this bomb goes off. Like, what should we do? And the questions are deliberately, the thought experiments are designed in such a way that they're deliberately very kind of gray areas. So there's no clear right or wrong answers. And that's, in these situations, the sort of stage blue people who have a rigid morality, they're not able to cope with these situations very well, which leads to evil. Because any finite attempt to formalize infinity is going to, by definition, lead to all sorts of problems and evil. And it's done for selfish purposes. So if you truly want to be moral, what you need to do is you need to have enough flexibility and open-mindedness such that, and consciousness and intelligence and selflessness, lack of bias, such that in these situations, you're able to adapt very fluidly and you're not hindered by any kind of rules or shoulds, but actually you look out for the greater good of the entire whole. And you need to have this very holistic perspective, not just the perspective of your little tribe, family, race, corporation, group, political party, nation, or species, or whatever. You need to truly be able to take a perspective that is beyond your species, beyond your tribe, beyond your nationality, beyond your gender, beyond any of these things. And then you will be able to be the best that you can be. You'll be more godlike. So the ultimate morality is a state of such radical high consciousness and complete neutrality and complete lack of self-bias and complete lack of personal agenda that and a perspective that is so broad that it encompasses the entire universe, such that you're able to see the relativity of everything, of all perspectives and all beings, and you don't get stuck on selfishly defending any one of them. And then you're able to make decisions and act intelligently with balance in perfect alignment with what is necessary for the advancement of the whole universe.
Advancement of the universe.
Yeah, it's a tall order to fill to get there.
Yeah, how do you do that?
Because the thing that's preventing you from getting there is all of your personal stuff. You'd have to be completely impersonal to be able to serve that role.
A good way to start is to have your morality sort of based around understanding, feeling that sort of oneness, whatever, oneness, loving, blissfulness, or maybe even clarity. You start with clarity, right? So you have to sort of accept this sort of oneness principle. Everything is connected. Everything is connected. No, like everything is connected. Literally everything. Everything that you do is connected to something else. Everything. And everything in the past influences you currently, and everything in the universe currently influences you also currently, and all of that will influence everything in the future, so on and so forth. That needs to be adopted first. And then you need some sort of goal, I guess, and that goal would be to clearly see your own experience, to clearly see what is going on to you personally. So first you want to adopt this sort of normal, like this is, everything's connected, simple, easy enough to adopt. And then you want to use that to adopt a different worldview. Please go for it. To adopt this worldview that everything that you experience is important. And so you can clearly see your own experience. This is what you want to adopt. So you're going to get into something strange immediately, right? So you'll see that the sort of traditional things that are bad, like killing things or stealing from people, that might block you from experiencing your own current experience, right? You might be caught up in thoughts and worried about fears of futures and past and all this stuff, right? You're going to be having problems with that because of all the things that you've done. Does that make any sense? And that it's going to expand even farther beyond the traditional sort of moralistic principles. Right? Now we're going to start including things like health, things like your media exposure, right? If you're thinking about some song and it's stuck in your mind, stuck in your head, you're going to be having a hard time experiencing the rest of the world. So maybe listening to music might be immoral. You're going to have a hard time thinking about your own personal experience at this moment if you're caught up thinking about TV shows or video games, so on and so forth. So we're going to massively expand the bounds of what ethical behavior includes because everything is connected. Literally everything is connected. And the one way you can test that is, sit down and meditate and see what comes up, So once you clarify that and you can see your own experience clearly, then you can start using that worldview, sit into that worldview, see your own experience and see how important it is. And then you want to use that to adopt the next worldview, which is pretty much what he's talking about here, how everything is love and everything is bliss. And simple enough. That is a nice, very nice basis for your morality because it's difficult to just adopt the worldview that he's describing here. You need to gradually get up to it. Gradually. That's how I see it, personally.
That means all of your cravings, desires, fears, beliefs, ideologies, all of your personal needs, all of this would have to be surrendered.
Yep.
Because all of these are going to bias your perception of reality and are going to limit your scope of understanding and concern.
Yep.
And your highest priority has to be truth above everything else. Because, of course, good and truth are identical. So this is what I would call transcendent morality. It's the morality that completely transcends all norms and rules. And oftentimes, it can look to people who are lower in their development and consciousness, it can look like actually it's completely immoral or amoral because it's so relativistic. It's so profoundly relativistic that it doesn't judge, for example, Hitler. It doesn't judge Nazis. It doesn't judge terrorists. It doesn't judge suicide bombers. It doesn't judge, rapists.
So let's remember, like, if you do something like judge other people, judging Hitler, and you sort of brood over this thing or judge the horrible acts that other people do in the world, that really, it builds up anger a lot of times. And anger is unpleasant. You don't want anger. It builds up these negative emotions, and it takes you away from your current experience, which is deeply infused with love and bliss and goodness and happiness or whatever. There's a different worldview, of course. But it's all there, and if you just pay close attention, you can get to it very easily. But there's so many things blocking us, which is all these judgments from things, and we have to recognize that, to notice that anger coming up when we think about When we judge, it's not really just thinking about it. When we judge the horrible acts of other people. And that is bad. To feel bad is bad. To judge, to feel angry is bad. To crave, to desire is bad. You don't want that. Maybe you do, different worldview here. But you don't want that. So you got to see that.
It doesn't judge corrupt politicians. It doesn't judge the capitalists. It doesn't judge the socialists. All of the things that you want to judge, it doesn't judge.
Yes.
That's precisely why it's so good. But the problem is that people who are too low in their development and consciousness, they don't perceive it as the ultimate good. They perceive it as evil.
Mm-hmm.
See, because they've defined the ultimate good as their own survival and all of their own biases. So when they've done that, when they see true goodness, they must project upon it their own biases, and of course, their ego must label that as evil. That's the whole tragedy of it. They're literally incapable of seeing goodness. Your capacity to see goodness in others is simply a function of your consciousness. The less conscious you are, the less good you're able to see in others. And if you're infinitely conscious, you will see infinite good in absolutely everybody and everything.
An important exception is out of compassion. If you're sitting with a friend who's been subjected to violence and abuse, it's far more compassionate to empathize with how they are feeling than it is to not feel it. Oh, yeah, I think you mean like the suffering, like to sort of empathetically feel that suffering and help each other grow together. I think I agree with that. But there are wrong ways to empathize. Maybe I don't actually quite know the proper language here, but there's a way to like suffer with other people, which is unhealthy and just kind of perpetuates badness and perpetuates the suffering. And there's a way to empathize in a way where you're not perpetuating their suffering. You're not suffering also, but you are like connecting with them. You're not dismissive of their suffering. That would be really bad if you were trying to say, well, it's all love, bro. Like you just feel the love. No, don't do that. You want to engage on the level that people are engaging with. If people are suffering in the most traditional way, if they're feeling bad, you don't want to try to dismiss their perspective and adopt a new one. They do that when they're training, when they're ready to do that. You don't force it onto people. But yeah, I think I agree with this. If you're sitting with a friend, you do want to have that sort of compassionate somethingness, but you do want to be careful not to perpetuate the suffering. You don't want to feel that compassionate, empathetic suffering to make it worse, which is a common thing for people to sit in all of their problems and talk to other people about all their problems and not really do anything about the problems, which is, you don't want to necessarily do it. This is a different emotional take here. You want to actually just process and deeply actually feel the things that you're feeling. And that's pretty much all you need to do, feel it. But sometimes people want to express more than they want to feel. So they never actually feel the emotion, they just express the emotion. And that expression perpetuates it in the sort of background because it's never been actually felt and is always there, just in the background, muddying up everything. And now it kind of spreads, so everybody else who's being more compassionate or empathetic, they're not feeling it either. They're just trying to express the emotion to each other, but it's tricky to detangle, I guess. And I don't want to be too strong on the side of saying that expressing your emotions is bad. It's not. But it can be bad. We do want to be vigilant of both sides of that. But yeah, definitely. You want to be compassionate with your friends.
Don't believe me. This is not an ideology. Actually do it. Do it. Become infinitely conscious and see what reality looks like from that vantage point. Don't assume you know how it's going to look. Don't assume that it's going to look neutral. It may not. It may look good. It may look really good. It may look scary good. It may look so good it terrifies you. So this leads us to the question of the age-old philosophical question of what is the good life? What does it mean to live the good life? Philosophers have been asking this question for millennia without really giving a clear answer. Well, I'm going to give you a very clear answer right now. The good life for human beings is to realize absolute good and then to work to embody it as best as you can for the rest of your life.
I like this take.
Or, to put it in other words, to become godlike.
Mm-hmm.
Or, to put it even more starkly, to become God.
Yeah.
So how good your life is simply a function of how close to God are you able to become. That's it. It's that simple.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, to be able to actually work towards embodying goodness, you first need to realize what absolute goodness is, or to even know that it exists. It's not enough to just hear someone tell you about it. I mean, this is a starting point.
Yep.
We got to start somewhere, so it's good to hear it from me. But that's not enough. I could be lying. I could be wrong. I could be deluded, whatever, from your point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So from your point of view, now you have to validate whether what I'm saying is true. And the only way you can do that is by actually becoming directly conscious of absolute goodness. And not only do you have to do that in order to validate me, but you have to do that for your own self, because until you become conscious of absolute good, then you won't really understand the point of embodying it or what you're really even working towards or why you're working towards it. You know, I can tell you to be godlike in your life, but you won't understand how, and you won't understand why, which is even more important. In the back of your mind, you're not going to be fully convinced that this is the right way to live your life. You're going to think that there are other ways. You're going to think that having a bunch of sex is a better way. You're going to think that having a bunch of money is a better way. You're going to think that doing a bunch of cocaine is a better way. You're going to think that traveling the world is a better way. And you're going to be wrong. But you won't understand why you're wrong. The only way to understand why you're wrong is to become directly conscious of what is absolute good. And then you can use that as your North Star to guide you for the rest of your life. And in a sense, that is what religion is trying to do. That's the function of religion. That's the function that it's served since the beginning of human civilization. It's tried to be that North Star, and it's tried to guide people. The only problem is that the people were just following some ideas and some ideology that somebody else told them. They never actually broke through to absolute good consciousness. And so they were just, it's a case of the blind leading the blind.
From his perspective, all religions are pointing to this. From a very narrow, like mystical perspective of religions, this is what it's pointing to. Very narrow mystical perspective. This is not common. And it's not necessarily what religions are about. This is what he thinks religions are about. That's what a lot of people think religions are about. That's not what religions are about. That's just your own projection. His own projection, everybody's projection, to say that it's about connecting with God. Bollocks. You see what you see, right? You're projecting the meaning all yourself. And he's projecting the meaning. I think he knows this. He knows this. Don't let him gaslight you into thinking that all religions are pointing to this and you've never seen it. It's his perspective. It's a different perspective.
Leading the blind, leading the blind, leading the blind off a cliff into evil. Because you can't get to absolute goodness through a mechanical process or through following rules or through the 10 Commandments or through hearsay or belief or any kind of ideology. All of that only leads to evil. The only way to get to absolute truth is by actually becoming conscious of it first and foremost, and then you can understand what it's going to take to actually start to embody it. Now, here's a really practical aspect to everything I've talked about here. This might have seemed to you rather metaphysical and abstract and philosophical. Here's where it gets practical.
Okay. Practical.
I want you to recognize that within you, from the beginning of your life, there was always an impulse inside of you, whether it was large or small, but it was there. There was an impulse inside of you to be good. Just as simple as that, just to be good. Isn't that true?
I'm not
Check.
sure.
Don't believe me? Check.
I'm not sure.
Is there this impulse inside of you to be good?
I don't know.
It might be as simple as you see an old lady walking across the street and she's struggling, so you want to go out there up to her and try to help her with her groceries or whatever that she dropped. Or it might be as simple as, your child is struggling with something at school, and then you have just a natural inclination to go and to help your child. Or you see a dog freezing in the streets in the middle of winter, and you just have a natural desire to grab this dog and take it home, feed it some food, and give it a warm shelter. Or you see a homeless man, begging on the curb for some food with a sign that says, please help, I'm hungry, whatever. And you just, have an impulse to you say, yeah, I should probably give him $5 or something. That desire, that impulse for genuine goodness, not because of how it's going to make you look, not because you have to, not because it's going to impress anybody, because all of these are, of course, obscuring factors. It could be the case that you're in a car driving on your way to church, and there's 5 of you sitting there in a van, you and your colleagues that always go to church together, and then you see this poor person sitting on the side of the road, and then you feel obligated, like, oh well, normally I wouldn't, but today I'm gonna pay him $20 because all my church friends are watching, and they're gonna think I'm so godly if I do this. If that's the reason you're doing it, then it's not genuine goodness. That's actually the ego sneaking in there. I'm talking about genuine goodness when you do it without any reward back, when you do it without any expectation of a, increase in your reputation. Not because you're going to get punished either. See, if you think like this, like, oh, well, look, there's that poor person. If I drive by and I don't give him $5, I'm going to feel guilty for the rest of the day. I'm going to feel bad, so I better give him $5. That's not it. That's ego. Mm-hmm. I mean genuine goodness. Think of one time in your life where you did something genuinely good for somebody, for no reward and for no reason other than for goodness itself. And think about how that felt. Now multiply that times 1,000,000, times infinity, and you will understand why God is nothing other than good. Because you'd have to be a fucking idiot.
Whoa.
You'd have to be truly a moron.
Whoa.
To be able to be good, but then not to be good and to do something else instead.
What a stark, jarring contrast here. He's talking about being nice and infinitely good, and he's insulting the audience. What the heck? Don't let him be mean to you guys. Okay, you're not an idiot. Okay. We have different worldviews here. People see things differently. We've been influenced by materialistic, mundane goodness in the sense, lowercase g goodness. All right, you're not an idiot though. All of society is working against this worldview that he's perpetuating.
What else are you gonna do? You got something better to do in the universe, but to be good. What are you gonna do? You're gonna go get money. You're gonna go get a bunch of sex, and that's gonna be better for you. Nothing will make you feel as good as being good. It's completely tautological. See, it has to be this way because good is good. That's what good is. It's very direct. It's so circular that it just is. So I'm telling you that you do have this impulse inside of you. This impulse is not ego. This impulse is actually God trying to move through you. The problem, of course, is that this impulse gets obscured and clouded and corrupted and forgotten because of all of the survival demands that you're placed upon as you're here trying to live in this material plane. You need to earn money, you got to feed your kids, you got to go to work, you got to answer emails, you got to do all this stuff. And because you're so busy doing all that stuff, you lose touch with this impulse towards goodness. And your life becomes purely pragmatic about getting stuff done. It becomes very mechanical. And all of a sudden you're going to work and you're working 40 hours a week, 60 hours a week, doing something, not because it's good, but because you need to pay the bills. You've gotten sidetracked and lost in the complexity of life and survival.
That sounds very unpleasant.
Like you might become an engineer who works for a defense contractor like Lockheed Martin manufacturing, missile warheads or nuclear weapons to be used in the Middle East or somewhere or whatever. And are you doing it out of goodness? No, you got sidetracked somewhere in life years ago, decades ago, and you're just unconsciously, mechanically moving through life, doing stuff, following rules to get your paycheck, to survive. And that has supplanted your true purpose in this life, which is goodness, the pursuit and manifestation of goodness. And you have a bunch of rationalizations and ideologies justifying that what you're doing actually is good. So the practical thing that I'm telling you here is try to remove all of that clutter and all of that obstruction and get down to the root of that impulse inside of you to be good and start to follow that impulse every single day, a little bit more and a little bit more, and build your entire life around that impulse. And if you do, that is going to be the best life that you can live. That life, that strategy will produce for you the greatest joy if you do that. Of course, it takes time to build up your life around this impulse. It can take years to build it up, especially if you've spent the last few decades living like a devil and constructing a life which is the opposite of this impulse, which is all purely based around survival. Being good, truly good, is one of the most challenging things you'll ever do in your life. Which is why so few people rise to this level of goodness. To be good requires being godlike, which requires that you face every fear and conquer it with love, which is the ultimate rule for living life. Every fear you encounter, conquer it with love. That's the ultimate solution to your life's problems.
True. Every single experience. Remember, this is the worldview he's trying to give us, to tell us, so we understand every single experience, every single manifestation of anything physical, every single manifestation of anything mental, and whatever other realm or domain you want to include with this. Everything is infinitely loving, everything is infinitely good, and incredibly blissful. This is what we want to adopt. And it's awesome. Everything. Absolutely. All of it. This is important.
For example, if you're working for Lockheed Martin as an engineer and you've been manufacturing warheads for the last 10 years, because that's just something you fell into that trap. And now you hear what I'm saying here and you realize, oh, shit, Leo's right. I have been manufacturing these warheads. Like, what was I even thinking? Why did I even get this job? Why did I stay here for 10 years? Now you face a problem. Now you face fear. Because now it's like, well, yeah, what Leo says is correct, but my job does not align with my impulse to be good. I have some other impulses to be good that, don't fit with this job. So, but what do I do? Like, I can't just quit this job. I got kids I got to feed them.
Can you?
And maybe I won't get another job. The economy is not doing so great right now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's fear. Fear arises. And then you have to conquer it with love. And you have to be fearless, and you have to make a difficult decision here, which is to say, okay, I got to find a new job that's going to be more aligned with my impulse to be good. And what might that be? I don't know. That means you have to go do research. You have to go job hunting. Maybe you need to change your entire career. Maybe you find that engineering no longer works for you. Now you got to become, I don't know, whatever. You want to become something totally different. You want to become an artist. Okay, you want to become an artist, but that's a huge transition.
Wouldn't that be nice?
There's financial difficulties there, difficulties with your family. Maybe your wife won't support you, blah, 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 right? But facing all those challenges is precisely then how you will realign your life and then build a life that will truly be good.
I love this. I love this because personal experiences. But you don't want to have this ideal here make you neglect your finances or your livelihood or anything like that. So yes, but, again, these worldviews shouldn't be conflicting each other or, at tension. You want to be able to adopt this understanding that everything is infinite love or whatever. And I guess if you have to leave your job in order to see that, that's your own decision, I suppose. But they aren't necessarily in tension. You can train to see infinite love and bliss while you're working, while you're doing military contracting or whatever. That's possible. It depends on how quickly you want to get to that. It depends on how deeply you want to develop this worldview that everything is love. You can do different things, but don't try to. Maybe not the best idea to go gung-ho and completely neglect all other aspects of life in order to develop this. Maybe not the best idea. It seems like he's saying that that's the best idea. Make your own decisions here.
That is the new good life for you. But of course, it's so scary to do that. It's much easier to stay at your old Lockheed Martin job and to keep earning a nice fat salary, not stressing yourself too much about being good or whatever, and just to ignore the fact that you're creating weapons that kill people, and just ignore that and just pretend like everything's fine.
Mm-hmm.
That's just one example. Hopefully you can see how this translates into millions of examples.
Absolutely.
It's just one example.
I must admit, I engaged in some unethical behavior this weekend. I went to a meetup to see my favorite streamer, Destiny. Wow, it was a lot of fun. Destiny's a super cool dude. It was a political meetup. I don't like politics. It makes me think about stuff in unhealthy ways and argue with people. At least I used to when I was a couple years ago. Always fun to get into crazy conspiracies and different worldviews, learning about the right and the left, and trying to change people's minds about it. I like getting caught up in that. It's very interesting. It's very entertaining. But I realized that was taking me away from the infinite love of the universe, So very unethical. I engaged in that this weekend. It was very fun. Also had some pizza. Yum! I haven't had pizza in a very long time. It was really delicious. Same thing there. Unethical, bloating from bread and cheese and blah, blah, blah. And today I have a sandwich. Yum. More of the same, bread and cheese. Falling off the wagon. Getting super unethical. But hopefully I can get it together this week and, get back into the flow of being healthy and happy. Anyway, we will continue.
So what does it mean to say that some person is good? Like, Sarah, she's such a good person, or Johnny, he's such a good person. What do we really mean when we say that about somebody? What we really mean is that he or she has godlike qualities. And what are those? Well, here are God's qualities: truth, honesty, integrity, concern for all rather than just oneself or just for some, doing what is necessary for the benefit of all.
Interesting.
Working for the benefit of others. Selflessness, self-sacrifice, love, non-judgment, humility, acceptance, non-attachment, consciousness, the recognition of beauty in everything, giving rather than taking, benevolence, fearlessness, wisdom, intelligence, creativity, flexibility of mind, or just flexibility, holism, the ability to see the whole and not just the parts, forgiveness of anyone for anything, balance, and not selling out.
Not selling out. Where did that come from?
Those would be some of
I
the
like them.
most important qualities of
I
God.
like
and
all
when
these
you see a
qualities.
person that aligns with most of these qualities that I just listed, you're going to automatically think this is an amazing person. This is an exceptional person. Wow, I want to be friends with this person. Wow, I want to marry this person.
Whoa.
Wow, I want to be a student of this person. I want to be a follower of this person.
Interesting.
Because such people are rare. And such people offer the world hope and a glimpse of what they could become. They offer you a glimpse of what you could become if you lived the good life, a godly life,
It's very good to
a
see.
godlike life.
See inspiration in others. Very good. Encourage you to be better. Very good. Very good. Yes.
And that is because in the ultimate biggest picture, all motion in the universe, all of evolution, basically is moving reality towards higher consciousness, higher unity, higher integration, and higher love, and higher goodness. Because ultimately it has to lead to an absolute infinity
He's completely missing the mark.
of goodness.
Completely missing the mark on this one. Completely. There's no directionality for evolution. It's just things are happening. Things that happen to be existing right now. And also, like, I know he's woke on this sort of stuff, like panpsychism, what we consider to be conscious is like completely arbitrary. Anything is conscious if you project your consciousness to it. Any system like this T-trade, T-set could be a conscious system. It is a conscious system if you see it as a conscious system. You're conscious only if you see yourself as conscious, or only if other people see you as conscious, or whatever. It's all projections. And sometimes they happen to exist. Most things that exist now, they're just existing, and it's not because of sort of evolutionary whatever nonsense he's going on about. Not going on to some sort of evolution of the consciousness to see infinite whatever. No, there's only like a very small subset of no. There's just big no. Big no on all of this. Consciousness is no. Evolution, different. Consciousness, different. Different fields, science and material stuff, consciousness, separated, not related, not connected.
Such that any point in the universe, if you select that point and you follow that point all the way to its natural conclusion, it might take billions and trillions of years, but if you follow all those points, eventually all those points will merge together into a absolute goodness,
We don't quite know what's going to happen with the universe, do we? So, I mean, if we're going to be sticking with the materialistic scientific worldview here, which it seems like he's going towards suddenly for some odd reason, and also sticking with some sort of biological somethingness where consciousness is relegated to humans with brains, I don't know. Strange. Everything's not necessarily uniting into some goodness, right? I mean, I guess everything is maybe possibly splitting apart to big, what is this called? The big freeze, heat death. I can't. No, heat death. Yeah, heat death of the universe, where everything is so far apart that there's very little gravitational whateverness between any particle, so it's nothing. Maybe he's considering that to be good. I don't know. I feel like he's conflating lots of different concepts, and it doesn't seem to work to me. It doesn't feel like it's working, even if everything recombined into some hot singularity of nothingness, no distinctions and stuff. How, I don't know. I'm not feeling this description currently. What he's getting at. There's no directionality for evolution. Everything that exists currently is just as evolved as everything else, right? Everything. So the air particles in your room exist just as much as you do. You are not more evolved than that. It exists. The measure of how good you've evolved is if you exist. Of course, I immediately got beyond biology because we do that sort of stuff. We break down distinctions, but any other biological system will say that exists. We can limit it to first to people, other people who are, big-brained, like Leo here. He exists, and then there are other people who are big-brained but don't care about spirituality. They also exist, and they're just as evolved. And there are small-brained, smooth-brained people out there in the world who don't care about, they're not intellectual at all. They don't have any sort of awareness of this spirituality stuff. They're just as evolved as we are. They're here. And other species, worms who, I don't know if bugs have brains or anything, bugs and stuff, they're just as evolved as us. Bacteria, viruses. You see, viruses, I'm going slightly beyond the biological definition of life, and then that spills out to every other thing that's not alive in the biological sense. It's all just as here as everything else. There's no directionality of it. One of them is not better than the other. No.
And that is how God created itself as absolutely good. You see? Any point within God, because every point is within God, any point within God has to ultimately lead to the Godhead. You see, it's just it's a question of how long it takes and how circuitous the route is, but eventually every point leads back to the source. And then it goes back around in cycles like this forever. And that's what God is. And that's what goodness is. And that's what love is. And that's what infinity is. And that's what you are. And so just you being alive, you have an opportunity to participate in this process. This process requires conscious participation on your part. And it's difficult to do. And the reason it's difficult to do is because you're selfish. Becoming good, becoming godlike is the hardest thing in the world, which is why there are so few godlike people in the world. Because it requires surrendering the self. And it's really difficult to surrender the self because 4 billion years of biological evolution has led to a very strong sense of self within you. That self was necessary by all of your ancestors. 4 billion years of ancestors you have of selfish ancestors that were increasingly more and more selfish because they had to be just in order to survive for you to get here. So of course it's difficult for you to abandon 4 billion years of evolution in this one lifetime. You might wonder, well, where is this God? Why is God invisible? Well, God is invisible because if God was visible, it would have to have a form. If it had a form, it would have a self. And if it had a self, then it wouldn't be infinitely good. So the reason God is invisible for you atheists and physicists, you think this is a cop-out, but it's not. It's actually the very nature and structure of God. God has to be invisible because if it were visible, then it would not be unlimited, and then it would not be absolutely good. It would actually be evil. So when you ask God to be visible, when you ask God to incarnate into a single limited form, you're asking God to be evil, which of course God won't do. But at the
I feel like we're mixing up so many different things. We talked earlier about the difference between the absolute and relative, distinction here, and God would be transcending absolute and relative. Yet he's saying it's certainly absolute and never relative. Okay, Leo.
same time, God is visible. This is it.
Oh, he's
you
saying
are
it.
God. This everything you're seeing is God.
Okay.
God is invisible by virtue of the fact that it takes infinite form. So you can't pin it down to any one form. So it's a rock, it's a tree, it's a car, it's a human, it's a dog, it's a alien, it's a planet, it's a whatever. It's all of it.
Interesting.
Now, here we got to talk about a very big trap that comes up for people. And this is falling into the trap of the ego or the self adopting a role or persona or a front of selflessness.
Oh yeah, that's good. I like
and
this.
confusing
I
that
like it
with
already.
what I'm talking about here, which is true selflessness. So please, let's distinguish these two things. We have true selflessness on the one hand, which comes from an increase in your consciousness and actually surrendering your biases and your survival attachments. That's the true selflessness. This is what actually makes you good. And then there's the egoic version of it, which is an aping or a mocking of that. It's doing that without actually doing it. It's pretending like you're doing that. So this is the example of, some of these spiritual people who like to talk about love and goodness, but then in reality, they are just adopting that as a persona. They don't have sufficient consciousness to truly be conscious enough to act selflessly. And they have all sorts of attachments and things. And they're mostly run by their ego. But now their ego has also added another feature to it on top of everything else. It's sort of the cherry on top of the ego sundae, as it were, is that the ego believes that it's selfless.
The ego of no ego. This is when you tell everybody that your ego is so gone that you deserve praise or help or something. It's a koan, Zen koan. Seize is utterly destitute. Seize is poor. Seize is a person. His name is Seize. He is claiming that he has no attachments. He has nothing. He's so poor, he has no qualities. Poor in qualities. So poor will be good. He's completely selfless. But he's telling people this because he wants praise. A lot of people get caught up in this. Notice it when you see it, please. Certain people are just adopting it. Again, as he says, it's not a philosophy, it's not an ideology, so on and so forth. People take it as an ideology. I mean, people are smart. And the ego is really tricky. It can take these things and say, now I know that I don't exist as an ego, so everyone else should see how enlightened I am and see how wise I am and so on and so forth. It's a tricky one. Watch out for it in other people. Watch out for it in yourself, of course, too. Yeah, this is a big one.
And godlike. And this is, of course, very dangerous and problematic.
Oh, yeah.
So, honestly, I even hesitated to release this and to shoot this video because after I came up with the idea for it, I was thinking like, well, but what's the point of even telling people about absolute goodness? Because isn't the only thing that's going to happen here?
It is strangely in line with the type of person who might say that everybody else is an idiot for not understanding infinite consciousness and infinite love. That's strangely in line with the type of person who would be pretending to feel the infinite. I mean, it is not necessarily connected, not necessarily, but strangely, very, very clearly fits into that trope. The person who is pretending to be spiritual in order to get some praise and they don't quite get it and they're disparaging other people, it certainly fits.
So they're just going to listen to all this, and then they're going to just adopt it as a persona, just another thing for the ego. And then this is just going to make them more egotistical and selfish. This idea of living the good life. Now they're going to go around thinking that they're living the good life when actually they're pure devils. And so I thought about that, gave me some pause. But on the other hand, this has to be explained somehow. So I just, look, there's traps everywhere in this work. You've heard me say that a lot of times in the past. And that's very true, especially for this episode. There's a huge, huge, huge trap here. So just watch out for this. And also, there's the trap of self-sacrifice and people-pleasing. And a lot of women especially fall into this trap. So I want to point this out to you, ladies, because you can really hurt yourselves here. But I mean, men can also fall into this trap. It's this idea that you take on this persona of being the self-sacrificer, the one who sacrifices for everybody else. So you sacrifice for your children, for your family, for your husband, for your boyfriend, for all of this, for the world, for the company. You're sacrificing and sacrificing, and you're giving and you're giving, and people keep taking from you, and they don't give you back. And then this exhausts you of your energy. It leaves you shattered and broken and abused. And then you stay in abusive relationships because you think that for you to be godlike to live the good life, like Leo said, I have to stay with my abusive boyfriend and he's just going to keep abusing me. And Leo told me I have to stay and I have to keep taking it because that's what God would do. No, Leo didn't tell you to do that. That's a misunderstanding of what I'm talking about.
Very, very strongly. It's important to recognize that the normal good stuff, traditionally good things, and traditionally bad, like the traditionally good things point towards this absolute good things. This is it's a good expression. I used this phrase earlier. The normal good stuff, being nice to people, being kind, being selfless in the most traditional sense, is a good expression of the absolute good. But it's not the most obvious expression is not always the right expression. And it's not, the expression of it is not it at all. There's something underneath the expression, and that's what you want to get to. And once you get to that, then the way that you express it doesn't necessarily need to align with things that we traditionally see as good. But this is so tricky to tease out. How do you get to that, the underneath the expression of this traditional good things, to feel that absolute goodness, and then express the absolute goodness, not in a caricatured way of only things that we traditionally see as good, or following some sort of particular ideology or following a set of rules or whatever. It's very tricky, but it's necessary to understand that. So I don't know, it's hard.
In that situation, actually, you need to see the larger good is served by, is not served by you being abused.
True.
Because when you're abused and your values are trampled upon, that is not serving the greater good. It doesn't serve you to be emotionally manipulated by narcissists and leached on by energy vampires. This doesn't do anything good for you and your ability to serve people in the world. This lessens your ability to serve others. You have to see the bigger picture here. You're lacking a holistic enough perspective.
Interesting.
And
serving one thing doesn't serve everything. I mean, it should be energizing. Maybe not. I don't know. Again, it's tricky. I don't want to limit it to a specific expression, but man, it's super energizing to be good. Absolute good. It's energizing. It's pleasant. It's not draining.
Really, you're succumbing to fear. You're not being fearless by staying in an abusive relationship. Actually, you fear. The reason you stay in the abusive relationship is because you fear leaving your abusive husband or boyfriend. And that's because maybe you think that you won't find a better boyfriend or husband. Maybe you think you're too old. Maybe you think it's too much trouble. Maybe you think it's going to be too painful. You're too attached to him. You've fallen in love with him. You don't know what's going to happen to the children. You're afraid for the children's sake and all of that. But that's fear. That's not true love. True love is stronger than that. True love is courageous. True love is bold in the sense that it's willing to cut some losses here and there, right? True love doesn't just get trampled upon.
Be driven by love. That should be the end of it. Be driven by love. But unfortunately, we have to make it very explicit. Be driven by love, not fear. But even saying that is driving by fear. So I have to say, don't be driven by fear. Being driven by fear is bad. Well, that's adding fear. But to make it obvious, you have to say it in that way. But the expression is just be driven by love, and that's it. It's pleasant. It's energizing. It's love, you know? Be driven by love, please.
Because if you truly are fulfilling this manifestation of the good life, you're a rare and unique individual. We need you as a leader in the world. And how can you be a leader in the world when you're stuck in this abusive situation? How can you be a leader in the world when everybody walks over you, when you can't enforce your boundaries, when the values that you value, when you value truth and honesty and love and all this, when you value this in your intimate relationship, but your husband or boyfriend doesn't, and he shits all over that? You see, that means you're sleeping with the devil. You're sleeping with the devil and you're tolerating the devil's games. That's not very godlike. See, to be godlike, God doesn't compromise with devils. You think if the devil comes to God and gives God a bunch of bullshit, God will just say, okay, yeah, I accept your bullshit? No. God's truth cuts through all of the devil's bullshit. And God doesn't let himself be manipulated by devils. If you're truly doing it right. Now, I framed it here in the context of for women, but of course, this doesn't just apply for women. It applies for men as well. There are many situations for you men where you also self-sacrifice and you people please and you don't enforce your boundaries and you think that you're being good by doing this, but actually you're being meek and weak. And weakness is not a quality of God. Strength is. So the antidote to your problem is more strength, more courage, more fearlessness, more integrity, sticking through, having the courage to stick through and honor your own values, right? And one of your values is that you don't allow people to abuse you. You don't allow devils to manipulate you. That should be one of your values. And if that means you're going to lose that relationship, then you have to take that hit and accept that pain of losing that particular relationship and deal with the fallout of it. That is really where the self-sacrifice lies. The self-sacrifice is not in tolerating abuse. The self-sacrifice is in sacrificing your weak little ego and all of its petty concerns about how it feels and its comfort and all that, such that you can ditch this situation and go on to a better situation, but going through a sort of a difficult period there in between the bad and the good situation.
Another thing I want to point out here is that he's doing a little bit of he does this a lot of emotional attacks, a lot of emotional appeals, I guess, in order to get you to this. It's fine. I mean, it's not bad. And it's hard to give a purely spiritual appeal to people who aren't already sort of spiritually inclined. So that's also important. It's good what he's doing. But we want to recognize that the way that he's speaking here, he's trying to translate translating a particular worldview to a different worldview. His, everything is love sort of worldview to the sort of mundane, normal, worldview, which is tangling lots of things. So when he's insulting people, or in this case, he's saying that the ego is weak and you don't want to be weak. These are just emotional appeals, which might be helpful to have people grow in the spiritual sense, but we also don't want them to grow in the spiritual sense and then think that the emotionality goes in with it. The spiritual should be separate from the emotional. These are separate things that you need to develop separately. And we don't want them to be too tangled up. You don't want them to be necessarily tangled up. We want them to be skillfully tangled up, I guess. That's one way people put these things, skillfully. So if we're being influenced by the emotional appeals, we want to, at some point, be aware that we want to abandon that sort of emotional drive and be driven by love. It's important, but it must be said. It's subtle, too. It's subtle. He does this a lot. A lot of his videos are, just straight up calling people idiots, right? Or saying things like, you need to be stronger. We got to recognize these are intellectual attacks, and these emotional appeals are not, they need to be let go of. If they help you, if they drive you into doing the sort of things that he's asking or he's suggesting or pushing us towards, if they do work, that's good, but let go of it after you start.
For example, if you're a drug addict, you're addicted to heroin, the self-sacrifice for you, in that case, is the sacrifice of the ego that occurs when you decide to kick heroin, cold turkey, let's say, and then all the withdrawals you go through and all the emotional agony and suffering you go through for the next month after kicking that heroin, that's the true self-sacrifice.
Is cold turkey the best way to get rid of heroin? Any heroin addicts out there, maybe consult a physician or whoever does that. I don't know if that's the best way.
Now you might wonder, Leah, what's the difference between good and love? Because you've spoken about love before, now you're talking about good. They sound like the same thing. Mm-hmm. Is there a difference? Well, they are very similar. There's a subtle distinction there to be had. But ultimately, all these absolutes are going to unify into a single thing. So ultimately, of course, the ultimate good is love. Love, truth, good, consciousness, God, self, everything, nothing, infinity, all these are identical ultimately. But also, as you sort of go lower in consciousness, they start to fragment and split apart into different facets, like I've talked about in my episode called The Many Facets of Awakening. So good is one facet of awakening, love is another facet of awakening, truth is another facet of awakening. You can have these realizations independently. You can also have them together in combination. Mm-hmm. You can realize how they all equate to each other. So there's different realizations of this.
Okay.
Mostly here I'm emphasizing good because I'm also relating it to the kind of common usage of that word that we use, which has a certain utility to it. The word good does serve a sort of a different function in our language than just the word love. They're not always used interchangeably. But yeah, ultimately they're very similar.
Why doesn't he start with the nice, pleasant, welcoming takes, which are very clarifying that there are distinctions at lower levels, but slightly higher level. He can start with this stuff, be very welcoming and tolerant, and help us all understand, as opposed to giving us hours of confusion. I don't get it. I don't get it.
Now, it's impossible to become good without the following things.
Okay.
Without truth, which includes honesty and integrity.
Mm-hmm.
This is crucial. If you don't value truth above everything else, you'll never be good.
Interesting.
By definition. Because if truth is not your highest priority, then the only other alternative is that falsehood and illusion is a higher priority than good. I mean, than truth. Because these are your only two options when it comes to truth. You either value truth above illusions and falsehood, or you value illusions and falsehood above truth. And if you do, then you're a devil and you can't be good.
Is this absolute truth? We're getting relative again. We should get more clear here. Relative truth against falsehood. It seems like he's saying, not some sort of absolute truth, which would include both.
Truth is good. And then also you need, it's impossible to be good without consciousness. You can't fake being good. Good is an honest signal. It's the most honest signal there is. You can't fake being a good person. Have you noticed that? No matter how hard you try, it won't work. And you can't fake being good through beliefs and through ideology. It's not enough to believe you're good. It's not enough to believe in God. It's not enough to read the whole Bible and memorize it word for word. That's not enough. You can't become good that way. Consciousness is what you're lacking. So raising consciousness is crucial.
Don't believe your beliefs.
Only be as good as you are conscious.
Never believe your
And the
beliefs.
reason most religious people aren't very good is because they're not very conscious. Which leads to the third point. It's impossible to be good without a deep realization and understanding of relativity. Relativity is crucial. And by relativity, what I mean is go see my episode called Understanding Relativism, Part 1. I will also release a Part 2 in the future. Relativity is hugely important, but relativity basically means understanding that all perspectives are relative, including, of course, your own, and appreciating the relativity of reality. Reality is absolutely relative. Everything is relative.
Absolutely relative.
And so
Love it.
that's another reason why religious people, traditionally religious people, fundamentalist religious people, aren't very good, is because they don't understand relativity. In fact, they demonize relativity. They demonize things like postmodernism. And they put their own perspective and worldview on a pedestal, and they denigrate all others. When you do that, you're not being truthful, and you're going to be judgmental of other perspectives. You're not going to see how they all fit together. You're not going to see the relativity and partiality of your own perspective.
Yep.
You're going to confuse your own perspective with the absolute truth, which is actually false. And therefore, you won't be good. You're going to be evil.
Yes, watch out for that. Sneaky. And Leo gives us a very good example of that throughout most of his videos, including this one. He gives a very good expression of what he's describing currently. Not saying that he's doing that necessarily. I don't know what his internal feelings are, but he's doing it. He's doing a good job of of acting judgmental. Very, very good job. Be aware of that if it ever pops up in yourself.
See how it works?
I do.
It's very elegant. The logic of this is very elegant and precise. The next thing you need to be good is a lack of bias, as we've been talking about. Being good is like being a very high-quality judge. You need to truly not have any biases towards any defendant or plaintiff. You need to be able to look at every situation neutrally, the way that God does, because God isn't attached to any situation. So God can look at it neutrally. You need to emulate that. The next thing you need to be good is a concern for the biggest picture, for the highest level, a concern for all rather than just some part. This is actually very closely related to this issue of bias. See? If you're concerned about your little tribe or your little political party winning or your little sect of your religion winning or your family doing well, but you don't care about the well-being of your neighbors or other families. If you care about your nation doing well, like you want America to do well, and you don't give a shit what happens in China or in Africa or elsewhere, that's the very thing that leads to evil.
Yes. Even if you think that your species, if you only care about your species and not everything else, that's evil. If you only care about things that exist and not things that don't exist, it's evil. If you only care about things that are scientifically real and you don't care about things that are imaginary, it's evil. We want to get beyond these distinctions and really experientially notice that if we conjure up, we can basically very, very simply understand that any system that is existing, if we are disparaging that system, if we're mean to that system, it's going to be bad for us, like directly. In this sense that we're referring to here is getting us away from this absolute good. If you slam your door, you're being a dick to your door. Stop it. The door is a nice person. It deserves your love and respect. Your computer, your phone, stop throwing it around. Stop being so cavalier to these things. They deserve compassion. Be nice to everything. And imaginary beings in your mind, people in your dreams, maybe people on TV that you watch, maybe video game characters. They all deserve your love and respect. It might be helpful to stop killing them. You might start to feel that love bubbling up. Very, very important. Get away from that self-bias. Get more holistic here. Very much. Expand that all the way.
Do you think God prefers America over China, over Russia, over Germany, over Brazil, over Argentina? No! God has no such preferences. God's concern is for the whole thing. You might say, well, so God's concern is for the earth. No, it's not for the earth. It's for the other trillion planets that exist in this universe as well.
Yeah.
And everything in between, and not just planets and all the creatures on them, but everything.
Everything.
Every microbe, every stone, every tree, everything anywhere.
Everything.
Every particle of space dust floating around in space out there.
Everything.
Everything. The concern has to be total.
Yeah.
Anything less than total concern for everything leads to evil.
Even things that don't exist. Even things that are imaginary. Everything. Everything. What if being not nice to something creates a better paradigm? Well, I guess in your own experience, it's all your own experience. Though, if you think that's the best option, all right. I'm not here to say it's not the case, but it's something that you can feel yourself. Being not nice is never the right answer. Being nice is always the right answer. Now, of course, this gets tricky again because I'm saying being nice, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have the typical expression, the normal expression of being nice. But there's an internal feeling. There's that connectivity to absolute goodness or love or truth or whatever nonsense word we're going to be using to describe it. There's a connection that you feel when you're doing the right things, when you're nice to everything. And there's a disconnection that you feel when you're not nice to everything. So you could actually be doing the normal expression of niceness. You could be saying please and thank you and bowing or whatever, and actually be completely disconnected and getting away from absolute goodness. You could also have the sort of typical expression of meanness, of anger or whatever, and be very, very connected with goodness, It's possible, but you have to be aware within yourself of how it feels to actually get to that goodness and how it feels to be disconnected from it. It's sort of a personal thing.
Because absolute good doesn't happen at a local level, it happens at the absolute level, at the total level, at the level of totality. And the last thing you need to really be good is non-judgment.
No judgment.
That's a huge one. Non-judgment. Notice how much you judge stuff all the time. You judge everything. Look at how much you judge within politics. And look, hey, I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, I am not saying that I am by any means completely above all of these
Of course
biases
not. Of course
and
not.
non-judgments
Of course not.
or judgments and
Yeah.
that I've perfectly embodied any of this stuff. I'm not saying I've embodied even half of it.
You're not fooling anybody if you were trying to. Of course.
I have a lot more work to do to embody this stuff.
We all do.
But what I am saying is that I've understood up to this point how this stuff works. And that's a big deal. You know,
I mean, it's a
before you can
important
truly
first step.
work to embody this stuff, how can you ever embody it if you don't first just understand what it is and how it works? Right?
First step.
So really, with actual
Understand it, first step. Second step, feel it, very, very shallow level. Third step, maybe extend that feeling in temporal space, time, have it for longer periods of time, and then deepen it as deep as you can go. Oh, yes. Yes.
at org, my first and primary concern for the last 8 years as I've been shooting this content has simply just been understanding what the hell is going on and how to live a proper life. Just figuring that out alone has taken me like over 10 years of never-ending research and contemplation just to figure out what the right things to do are.
Years. It's always important for him to tell us how many years he studied. I love it. He's an expert in this field, whatever this field is called. He's been doing it for years, boys.
Now,
years.
at this point in my life, I've kind of now I kind of know what all the right things to do are, but I haven't done them all.
Yeah.
That'll take me another 10 or more years.
He knows intellectually. We all know intellectually what to do. We've all been told it. I mean, it's very basic stuff. We all know intellectually. But you need to know it. Got to know it.
To start to do them all, right? So if you're sitting there thinking like, well, but Leo doesn't behave this way. Well, that's right, because Leo is a finite thing. Leo is only 35 years old.
Sure,
Leo
yeah.
has another, hopefully, 40 years of life left to work all this stuff out.
Only 40.
And Leo is not above you. Leo suffers and deals with all the same shit you do.
True.
See, maybe I'm a little further along, a few years more developed than you, but overall, I mean, whatever issues are preventing you from becoming completely godlike, well, those are the same issues that prevent me from becoming completely godlike and prevent every other of the 8 billion people on this planet from doing the same thing. If it was as easy to do as just watching a few of Leo's videos, then the whole world would be godlike, which obviously isn't the case. So obviously it's very, very difficult to do, even if you know how to do it. Knowing how to do it is the easy part, but still, it's hard to get. Even to this point, it's hard to get. Most people will never just reach this level of understanding, conceptual understanding. But then to actually fully live in alignment with this is very, very difficult. In fact, I almost hesitate to feed this idea into your mind because now you see the problem that's going to happen here is that now you're not going to be able to enjoy life.
Don't judge
because
yourself.
you're going to have this idea in your mind of like, oh, I have to be godlike. And every single day you're going to be realizing how ungodlike you are and all the things I told you. And every single day you're going to notice how, oh, I'm judging someone there and oh, I'm biased here and oh, I'm not conscious in this situation. It's like, oh, and I was an asshole in this situation. And then you're going to get so neurotic about this whole thing of being good that actually you're going to pervert the entire process and you're going to get depressed by it, and then you're going to turn into a devil.
That's tricky. It's hard to deal with. It's hard to understand. We've all been there, though. Have we? We've all been there, seeing that everything is connected. Literally everything is connected. I'm going to crazy extremes here, saying that imaginary things and all that stuff is important for, your connection to whatever the heck he's talking about. Right? I'm saying that, and it's so tricky because it's so easy to feel immediately when things are disconnected, and it's so easy to see other people being disconnected from it, and that judgment. It's like you see the other people being disconnected, and either you feel compassion, which is a good thing. You feel compassion. You say, oh, I wish this person could feel the infinite love, and hopefully we can all grow together and feel this infinite love together. Or you can feel this sort of judgmental negativity of this person's doing the wrong thing, or they're such an idiot, all the things that he's been saying. And oh boy, you feel it, and it feels bad. You feel that disconnection. And then you feel that disconnection and say, oh no, I'm disconnected. And you feel even more disconnection. It's so hard. It's so tricky to get around. So tricky to get over. Get over is not the right word, but through and see beyond and feel the infinite love. Because even being disconnected in the way that you think you feel disconnected, that is one expression which is not disconnection. You can't be disconnected. It's tricky. It's tricky. This is hard, though. It's very hard. Please do not at least understand that you don't. I don't know. I don't know what the things to say are, but they must be said, but there's no way to say it. I don't know.
Because you're going to be guilty over this.
Don't feel guilty.
Your life is going to suck
over
for the next
anything.
5 years as you're struggling with all this. See what you do?
I see.
I know, because I've done it.
Yes.
I mean, it's very, very tricky.
Yeah.
You have to be very careful about the way in which everything twists inside out, upside down.
Upside down, inside out.
That's just the nature of the ego mind. It's always perverting everything. It's misunderstanding everything. It's taking everything the opposite of way. It's approaching everything backwards. Well, yeah, that's why it's difficult to do.
It's so difficult.
Again, if there weren't all these traps, everyone would have done it by now. There would be a lot of really, really good people out there in the world. Very godlike people. And the fact is, there just aren't.
Nope.
Because there's so many traps that they get lost in these traps.
And the traps are primarily, I think, this is kind of my own personal, thoughts here, my own model here. I was defining these different fields of viewing the world. Everything is connected, and then like only your experience matters, and then like everything is infinite love. And I feel like there's a tangling that happens sometimes. The worldviews get connected and tangled in misapplied ways, and that is where the confusion gets into. That's where that suffering and that corruption and whatever you want to call it. I guess you're wondering how to help others, and sometimes honestly it's just too much, and it isn't always nice. Yeah, kind of really. Yeah, exactly. That's it. That's that very tricky feeling. It's like you want to help others, but do you want to do it out of compassion, or are you doing it out of like judging other people? Are you doing it out of like disparaging their worldview, or are you propping up yourself? It's so hard to untangle, and like yeah. Okay, I'm getting a little overexcited. The tea is okay. We're
So there you go.
Yeah.
The bottom line is that life is very simple. Devote your whole life to actualizing goodness with a capital G.
Yes.
And then, once you've made that commitment, then take the actions that goodness demands. See, goodness demands certain difficult actions that, of course, we don't want to take.
Yeah. It is a journey, man. There's your normal. How am I saying? Everything's connected. Only your experience matters. Infinite love, and then within you finally get that infinite love. Then you can get better at seeing your own experience, and then you can get better at actually interacting with the world and all the things. But it's super important. It's all the journey. It's all be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with yourself.
That's why most of us aren't very good.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to take those actions that goodness demands.
Yes.
Maybe goodness demands you quit your job. Maybe goodness demands you go back to school. Maybe goodness demands you leave your boyfriend or girlfriend. Maybe goodness demands that you go meditate in the woods for a month. Maybe goodness demands that you give more money to charity and you don't have very much money. Maybe goodness demands you read more books and you don't want to read books. Maybe goodness demands you stop smoking weed because it makes you chronically lazy and you don't want to do that. You're addicted to it. Whatever. Well, do you want to grow or not? Do you want to self-actualize or not? If you do, then this is what we're talking about here.
It's even so hard because like even when you feel that infinite love, and I'm saying very specifically like it's better than anything, it's better than all the stuff that you feel, and I'm only at a very, very shallow level here, and it's so much better than anything. It's so much more, I don't know, satisfying, fulfilling, whatever. There are different words you can use. It's better. Simply just better than anything else. and even after getting a taste of it, you can corrupt it. I mean, how silly is that? And then judging and nah, nah.
And that's really all there is to life.
That's it.
You're either actualizing towards the highest goodness, you're becoming more godlike, or you're not. And you're wasting time with distractions, and you're
Wasting
stimulating yourself in alternative ways,
distractions.
which are all going to be poor substitutes for the real deal.
So true.
See? All right, that's it. I'm done here. Please click that like button for me and come check out actualize.org. That's my website. On there, you will find the book list. You will find the life purpose course. You will find my blog. You will find the forum.
Okay.
And other material and exclusive content that I plan to be releasing in the future. So stay tuned for that.
Will do.
Make sure you check back with me because I will be releasing new courses new resources and other things I have planned in the future.
Okay.
And you'll want to be staying aware of those things because they could really help you in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And the final thing I'll say is this. Remember...
Why? Leo, why? Why do you end your videos... That's it. That's it. And then like another 5 minutes. Leo, why? End the video at the end of the video. Okay, sorry.
That my teachings...
My own anger. It's not very loving anger, okay? I'm baffled by Leo's style sometimes. I mean, it's so predictable. He always ends his video 10 minutes before the end of the video. I don't get it. Just say everything you have to say. And then end the video, Leo. He writes a script for all these things. Why? Okay.
Are really designed for enthusiasts of this work.
Okay.
I go into unnecessary detail, truly, and I cover topics that, do you need to know all these topics? Not really.
Not really. Okay.
My work is designed for philosophers, which means that these are people who love this material. These are lovers of wisdom.
Lovers of wisdom.
In the literal sense of philosopher, lovers of wisdom. So if you love wisdom, then that's what this work is for you, is for.
What the heck is it with spiritual people and like giving me the etymology of words? Like as if the etymology matters. I mean, I guess everything's connected, so it kind of, but I don't care about what the literal meaning of the word is. I don't care so I don't care, man. I don't understand this. And there's lots of wordplay that goes on there. What is the problem with this nonsense? Just tell me directly what you're saying. I don't need to hear some sort of lesson about the history of the language and how it developed over time. That has nothing to do with the usage of the word today. But of course, it has everything to do with the word and you know, karma. Words have karma. It seems so unimportant.
My content is designed for that, so that you love the wisdom, you love the details, you can sort of really go deep and juicy with it.
Juicy.
So just keep that in mind.
Okay.
For many of you, this level of depth and detail may not be necessary.
True. The tolerance comes out at the last 3 minutes of the video. He's giving some tolerance. He's giving some compassion. He's giving some like helpful tips, which should be at the front. And maybe like removing all the insults throughout.
It all very much depends on how much you want out of life, you know?
I don't get it.
You're going to get out of life what you invest into it. And if you just want a basic, successful life, then you'll probably find my material too long-winded and too abstract and too philosophical. And you can find other teachings and teachers out there that are a little bit more direct and a little bit more practical than me. Mm-hmm. But if you actually enjoy contemplating how wisdom works, how everything interconnects together the way that I do, that's what my love and passion is for, then this work is for you, and you'll be able to appreciate it. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, certain fruits will come from going to this level of depth. You'll have a deeper understanding and appreciation of wisdom in life than you might otherwise have if you only took the more utilitarian approach. But hey, find whatever method works for you. That's one of the most important things I can imprint you with, is that in this work, the point is not to follow Leo. The point is to find a path that works for you. And if I'm part of that path, great. I'll be part of that path.
So tolerant. So kind.
Until I no longer am.
Wow.
And one day I no longer will be part of your path. But also don't be too eager to leave me behind, because there's a lot still you haven't learned from me yet. See, just by watching a few videos, you think you've understood it all, but you haven't. I can promise you that.
Can promise.
And there's a lot more that I'll be sharing with you in the future. It's not just a rehash of the same old material. We have a lot of practical topics to come. I know I've spent the last year or two really hammering on the existential, metaphysical, and sort of abstract philosophical topics.
Even if it is a rehashing of all the old material, we haven't listened enough. We need to hear the same material over and over and over again, right? We heard the same thing before. I mean, these people have been telling us for thousands of years. We've got philosophers and religious leaders from 2,000 years ago telling us this same basic nonsense that we hadn't listened to before. So even if he is rehashing the same old thing, and he's going to give us 5-hour videos saying nothing more except for everything's love, or everything's connected, oneness, or some stupid thing like that, we need to hear it because we haven't heard it. Obviously, we're not living that life, so we need that inspiration to rejuvenate our practice every once in a while. It's very important. So even if it is the same old, I want to hear it, Leo. I want to hear it.
The very spiritual topics, but we're reaching a point now that I'm sort of exhausting that for a while at least. I feel satisfied with the level of content, sort of the catalog of content that I've built around the spiritual topics. And in the future going forward, I'll be talking more about just very practical topics, simple stuff, success-based stuff, relationship stuff, more practical psychological stuff that's not so spiritual. And I know you guys will love that stuff, so thanks for hanging in with me and suffering through my overly metaphysical deliveries and so forth.
I didn't realize he's got a little bit of insecurity here. He thinks he's causing some suffering with some. I guess he is causing some suffering for some people watching these videos, not getting anything practical or useful or in their sense of whatever from it. It's interesting to see that coming from Leo. We all have that side of us thinking that we're not perfect or good enough for whatever in some field. It's interesting. Yeah. Hopefully he gets beyond that. Hopefully he sees that everything he's doing is perfect. Obviously he knows it intellectually. Hopefully he sees it. We can all together learn that everything is perfect and everything that we're doing it's a great expression of the absolute, and nobody's suffering through anything.
And the practical stuff is coming.
Okay. Wow. Thanks so much, Leo. I like Leo and his content. Wow. Much appreciated.